Before a massive, newly constructed water wheel, Derek, Raymond, and a young blonde girl observe the achievement. Derek notes that this is merely the beginning. From a distance, a woman with striking red hair watches them, her eyes wide with curiosity as she wonders about the person responsible for such a feat. The scene shifts to a memory of a younger Takir, holding a book with a gentle smile. He makes a firm resolution, certain that this time, for sure, he will save his family. His vow hangs in the air as the view pans up the towering water wheel, a symbol of his newfound determination. The narrative then flashes back to a grim past. The Care calendar, year 513. Kate announces to the public that the execution of Takir, the former lord of the Ested territory, will now commence. He clarifies that this action is being carried out under an agreement made with Baron Solis. As the proclamation echoes, Takir, bound and kneeling, hears the tolling of the bells that signal his end. His entire body is racked with pain. Positioned in the center of the town square upon a pyre, he listens to Cade's speech, realizing with grim certainty that they are talking about him. He looks out at the crowd, his expression one of weary resignation. He understands their anger and feels he cannot blame them. The atmosphere is so tense, he thinks, that it feels like someone could throw a stone at any moment. A soft sigh escapes him. His thoughts drift back to the territory his mother and father had developed and protected for over 10 years. It had been a land blessed with fertile soil and an excellent lord. But then, a cascade of disasters struck. Intense floods, a devastating war, and an epidemic that claimed his family. Even the house steward, a man everyone had relied upon for generations, was lost. He was the only one left. He knew the commoners resented him, calling him incompetent and a lord with no authority behind his back. The calamities wouldn't stop, eventually leading to a large-scale invasion by a neighboring country. He felt he was a person lacking in every way. The only thing he could do after they were defeated was to make a trade. In exchange for the lives of the commoners and their land, he was willing to offer his own life, along with the small amount of wealth he had managed to amass. He accepts his fate, believing his death will allow everyone's lives to return to normal and grant them a measure of peace. With grim resolve, he calls for the flames to be ignited. His final moments are interrupted by a desperate cry. A young woman in a hooded cloak and pushes through the crowd, calling his name. Takir recognizes her voice, a flicker of relief on his face as he recalls that she managed to escape a previous attack. In a flash of movement, and throws herself onto the execution platform, positioning her body to intercept the descending axe meant for Takir. A voice, heavy with sorrow, echoes in the sudden stillness. "You shouldn't do that, Anne." The scene shifts, focusing on another interaction. Takir warns a young man with a scarred face to stand back from the danger. The man simply thanks him for supporting his siblings by arranging for them to work as maids in the Solis household. His gaze returns to and on the platform, his expression one of grim understanding. He knows all of this has happened, or will happen. He knows it all. Kneeling before her, Takir takes her hands and speaks gently, assuring her that no matter what others might say about him, he knows she has always taken great care of his subjects. Overwhelmed, and remains on her knees, trembling among the feet of the silent onlookers. The crowd instinctively shuffles back, creating a small, clear space around the pair. Tears stream down Anne's face as she looks up, her expression a mixture of profound grief and gratitude. At the sight of the execution, Takir's loyal subjects pray for him with clasped hands and tear-filled eyes. They recall his character, remembering how he braved calamities and epidemics alongside them, shared their meager food and beds, and worked tirelessly to restore their fallen territory. Bound to the post, Takir looks out at them, his mind whispering the names of those he recognizes: Claire, Mazzali, Rose. He is stunned, realizing that even in this final, desperate moment, they are still crying and praying for him. He lets out a soft, wry laugh. It was strange to think it now, but their devotion, especially from such beautiful women, made him genuinely happy. He hadn't realized he was so popular. The sight of the entire crowd, a sea of his people united in prayer for him, fills his vision. His eye widens in astonishment. Everyone, they were all here for him. Suddenly, a brilliant light erupts, engulfing him completely. He coughs, thinking it's just smoke from the pyre. Believing this is the end, he closes his eyes and offers a final, silent thought. "Thank you, everyone." His consciousness, however, is jolted by an internal notification. The necessary conditions have been met. With the manifestation of this skill, he's been blessed with bloodline magic, space-time magic, and a territory appraisal skill. The realization hits him with staggering force. Now, really, the flicker of hope is immediately extinguished by despair. A lord's powers manifest from their subjects' loyalty, but what good were they now? It was too late. With this, his time as Solis von Takir had ended. He screams in anguish, crying out that it doesn't need something like this now. His world shifts. A historical record marks the Care calendar, year 493. Takir is born as the second son of Baron Solis' family. He awakens in a strange place, unable to move his body properly or speak beyond infantile cries. A warm feeling spreads from his arm, and as he looks down at the tiny limb, the shocking truth crashes down on him. He's been turned into a baby. His mind flashes back to the execution. He remembers his authority activating, presenting him with a choice. He had desperately chosen yes, triggering his bloodline magic. A message had explained that space-time magic would perform a transfer, compiling his territory appraisal data into the history of Baron Solis before moving his soul to a new vessel, erasing the old one. He had tried it, never thinking it would actually work. Back in his infant body, he stares at his tiny hand. It casts a long shadow, the silhouette of his former adult self. He taps his finger, a simple motion, and considers his new reality. He was going to be reborn, but this time with his bloodline magic. He holds the book titled History of Baron Solis, a physical manifestation of his new power, and realizes with certainty that it worked. The prayers of his people at the end of his life truly bore fruit, granting him this second chance. Despite this profound realization, his new infant body betrays him. The joy of knowing he can see everyone again is overwhelmed by instinct, and he erupts into uncontrollable wails, shattering the solemn atmosphere. His cries immediately draw a gentle response. His mother, and scoops him in her arms, her face a picture of loving concern as she asks what's wrong with her little Takir. She offers to give him some food. As he gazes at her, he recalls a painful fact from his previous life, and was only 16 when her own mother died at 35 from an epidemic. He quickly calculates that, and must be around 19 now. The thought of her being so young makes her offer of food suddenly alarming. The realization hits him with dawning horror. By food, she means breastfeeding. He internally screams in protest, trying to assert that while he may look like a baby, inside he is a man in his 50s. He begs her not to do it. His frantic, silent protests are completely lost on her. Seeing his flailing, and simply misinterprets his agitation, wondering aloud if her Takir-chan isn't feeling hungry right now. His wails of protest, their true, meaning unheard, echo from the grand estate. In the end, he could not win against the baby's instincts. Now fed and pacified, a mysterious feeling of guilt washes over him as he lies in stupor, wondering what he even said or did during his panic. This feeling of dissonance triggers a point of clarification in his mind. The thought of being an old man in his 50s feels wrong. He corrects himself internally. That was Nishida Takahiro. He, Solis von Takir, was executed when he was only 20 years old. But this correction brings with it a new, unsettling sensation of discomfort. Fragments of another life flash through his mind. An office, a leave of absence form, a modern city street. He stares bewildered, wondering what in the world these images are. He is plunged deeper into the fragmented memories. He sees himself as Nishida Takahiro, kneeling in despair beside the hospital bed of his wife, Yukiko. The memory then shifts abruptly to a moment behind the wheel of a work truck. A sudden, violent crash shatters the mundane scene, and with the impact comes a dreadful understanding. In the darkness of his infant mind, the pieces click into place. He remembers now. The memory is one of pure agony. He sees himself as Nishida, screaming at the heavens, questioning why this tragedy befell him after all he had done, believing everything was finally going well. The infant Takir lies in his crib, a single tear tracing a path from his eye. He understands now. These are the memories from the life he lived before Takir, the life of Nishida Takahiro. As an infant, Takir is overwhelmed by memories of his previous life. He sobs, thinking of the wife he left behind, wondering what became of her. He grieves that with him gone, she is now utterly alone, with no children or relatives to support her. As he cries, a gentle hand reaches for him. A soft voice calls out his new name, Takir-chan, urging him not to cry. He is lifted into a warm embrace. His new mother, and holds him close, reassuring him that she is right there. In his mind, the infant recognizes her. A man named Derek then leans over him, playfully pinching his cheeks and remarking that crying is a waste of his good looks. Takir's tear-filled eyes shift as a hand gently taps his cheek. He recognizes another presence, thinking of him as his father. The room fills with playful energy. Derek continues to stretch the baby's cheeks, prompting him to laugh and shout for him to stop, while a young boy watches with delight. The boy, his older brother, leans in close to Takir, a look of happy surprise on his face as he exclaims that the baby has stopped crying. His brother beams, a wide, joyful smile spreading across his face. The family is gathered together on a sofa, a picture of domestic bliss, and holds the infant Takir. His older brother snuggles close to her, and Derek leans over them from behind. But this idyllic moment shatters in Takir's mind. His eyes widen with the chilling realization that he knows the tragic end this family will meet. He is struck by a horrifying thought. Must he live through the pain and despair of losing everything all over again? His eyes snapped open with newfound resolve. He would not let that tragic history repeat itself. He vowed to stop the fate that befell the Baron's family in his past life. To do so, he would change history itself. He realized he possessed two crucial weapons: the historical knowledge from his life as the executed nobleman, and a modern knowledge from his life as Nishida. He resolved to use everything, even activating his authority to once again obtain the time-space transfer skill. This fierce determination reminded him of a promise made in another life, as Nishida Takahiro. He recalled vowing to create a new future together with Yukiko. With that memory, he became determined to dream of a new future once more. He acknowledged, however, that as a baby, it was mostly just talk for now. Still, he could begin to form a plan. And so time passed. By the Care calendar's year 496, Takir was 3 years old, already engrossed in books. His mother, Anne, entered the room, marveling at her son's genius for reading so soon after learning to speak. She informed him she had work to do and asked him to be a good child and stay in the room, to which he cheerfully agreed. With his mother gone, Takir reflected on his progress. Since he already knew how to read and write, he had begun devouring books. The leisure this afforded him also allowed him to observe the world around him with greater clarity. His observations revealed a world on the frontier with vast, fertile, and undeveloped land. This was the Estel territory ruled by his family, the Baron Solis. He concluded that the civilization's technological level was roughly equivalent to that of medieval Europe before the Industrial Revolution. From the vast territory, his focus narrowed to their home. The mansion itself wasn't particularly tasteful in his estimation, but it was still impressive, the very type of building one would expect to see in a classic fantasy story. His analysis went deeper than architecture, turning to the very foundation of the society. He understood that in this world, magic exists. It is the symbol of the ruling class, the nobility, and the source of the respect they command. He further understood that this power was not singular. The two forces that truly define the feudal lords are authority and bloodline magic. His understanding solidified. While the history of the Solis domain was a product of authority, his own second chance at life was a gift of bloodline magic. With this framework, he began to organize the future he remembered. Using the history of Baron Solis, his own memories, and other texts as reference, he had amassed a significant amount of information. He decided to structure it around what he termed the 5 calamities. He grimly recalled that in his past life, there was little to say about that period other than that they were struck by one blow after another. It had been an incredibly difficult time. The memory of this helplessness caused him to thrash in his sleep, hands pressed to his head as he mentally screamed about the impossibility of protecting themselves from weather and invasions. His mother and maid, however, merely saw the gesture as an adorable pose, fawning over how cute their little Takir was. His mind, however, was far from cute thoughts. He knew he needed to gather intelligence on international affairs to prepare for the invasion of the year 505, led by the so-called invincible General Weiss, about whom little was known. He resolved that he had to find a way to deal with this. 2 years passed. Now at 5 years old, Takir felt a surge of panic. He had once thought he had time, but now he realized he had already lived through 5 years. He had already lost so much time. He felt sick. Checking the care calendar, he confirmed it was the year 498. Clutching his head, he forced himself to calm down, to breathe and sort through the mounting chaos in his mind. He recalled the sequence of events. A great harvest in year 499 caused prices to crash, devastating the territory's income. This led to a massive crop failure the following year. Then came trouble with neighboring lords, an issue with its own cascading consequences. He laid out the timeline of disasters. The surplus harvest, the volcanic eruption and drought, the conflict that led to his brother's death, the costly war, and finally, the flood. Seeing each disaster marked as new on his list, he flew into a panic, shaking a book and mentally screaming. Who was it that said we still have plenty of time? Composing himself, he summarized the 5 major problems he had to deal with, which he called my past life's 5 calamities: a surplus harvest, a poor harvest, a territorial dispute, war damage, and the flood. He realized that at this rate, preparing for them individually was pointless. In his past life, by the time the Great Flood hit, they had no energy left to deal with it. He reflects on his past life, realizing that as a child, he would have known nothing of his family's territory or domestic affairs. Grateful for his current knowledge, he knows he must handle what he can. With a click of a door, he approaches his mother, apologizing for the interruption. She turns to him with a gentle smile, asking what he needs. She expresses her happiness that he is relying on her. As he stands before her, Takir internally observes that his mother has entered her work mode, a state rumored to put her on a completely different level from other civil servants. Having confirmed this, he states that he has a favor to ask of her. While her son speaks, his mother's thoughts wander for a moment. She muses on how cute her child is today, but her mind quickly shifts to a more pressing matter. A project she's working on isn't going well. She recalls hearing that Estel has amazing craftsmen and considers consulting with them. Seeing his opening, Takir makes his request. He feels a bit of shame at resorting to manipulation, but with his goals in mind, he sees no other choice. He asks for permission to go outside and visit the workshops. His mother simply smiles, telling him it's fine and to leave it to her. A few days later, Takir reflects that he was given permission to go into Estel, but under 2 conditions. The first was delivered by his father, who sternly instructed him to behave as a proper noble would. Takir readily agreed. The second condition arrives with a sudden interruption. A young maid appears before him, announcing her presence. She then startles him, shouting his name and declaring with unnerving confidence, "I know it all." The second condition was that this maid and would accompany him on his visit. Accompanied by his maid, and The young Lord Akir looks out over a bustling city street, remarking on the large crowd. A map clarifies their location. The city of Est, the largest in the Estel territory and a key part of the Care Kingdom. Formed around a central plaza, the walled city contains the Lord's mansion at its edge. The vibrant market confirms his internal thought. The town truly is better this way. This city, Est, is where the region's supply chain begins, its prosperity driven by mining, trade, and agriculture, which are the main sources of income. At a food stall, Takir's eyes light up at the sight of a large, freshly made pastry. He exclaims to the elderly vendor how incredibly good it looks, while, standing beside him, drools slightly in anticipation. He turns to his companion, asking, "What's wrong, and do you want to eat together?" She offers no reply, her expression remaining neutral. As he watches the vendors, Takir reflects on his past life as the commoner Nishida, a man who was a very good eater. The commoner's blood within him boils with appreciation. He then overhears the stall owners realizing with excitement that the Baron's young master liking their food could be used as a powerful selling point. Their prediction comes true instantly. A crowd swarms the stall, all demanding the food approved by the young master. In the ensuing chaos, a man in formal attire approaches Takir and, apologizing for surprising them as he tries to manage the situation. Stepping away from the commotion, Takir glances at and feels a wave of awkwardness. He is suddenly reminded of her identity and is the daughter of the Solis household's head maid. His thoughts delve deeper into her past and received a strict education to become a maid from a young age. She was also exceptionally talented in martial arts and sword fighting, so skilled that ordinary soldiers were no match for her. This was a result of her father being a commander in the standing army, who ensured she was drilled in self-defense. He recalls that Anne, having just turned 15, had recently graduated from being a maid apprentice to become his personal maid. A somber realization then hits him. This very plaza was the place where he met, and for the last time, during his execution in his previous life. Takir's mind then shifts to the original history he experienced. In that timeline, and was first the personal maid and bodyguard for his older brother, Derek. He remembers seeing the two of them training together in the courtyard. It was only after Derek's death from an epidemic that Anne was reassigned to serve him. He continued to recall the tragic circumstances of Anne's past from the original timeline. After losing the two people she served, one after the other, she had fallen into despair. At the age of 30, she had taken her mother's place as head maid, after her mother also passed away from the same cause. Shaking himself from the somber memory, he tried to compose himself, and had already noticed his change in demeanor. She asked if something was the matter, but he quickly waved it off, declaring it was nothing and urging them to proceed. As they walked, his gaze settled on her. He thought of her as the dignified, quiet, and extremely beautiful, red-haired Anne. He internally admitted that he had never been very comfortable around her, not since she first began her service. Whenever he acted in a way unbecoming of a noble, she would scold him with a sharp, indifferent tone that he found difficult to describe, and, seemingly unaware of his thoughts, offered her own observation. She assured him that even if he didn't always act as a noble should, the people of the territory viewed him favorably, commending him for being so approachable. He looked away, slightly embarrassed, admitting he had done so just earlier and offered a quiet apology. It was because of this dynamic, he mused, that he had started to call her Ice Lady Anne, from her perspective, and conceded that while she did trust him, he still scared her a bit. She resolved to watch his behavior closely at the workshop, certain that his parents also believed she was the one who could ensure he behaved. They arrived at a workshop, where they were met by a large, burly man with his arms crossed. The workshop manager, Geld, stated firmly that this was not a suitable place for the young master of a noble family. Takir, completely unfazed, cheerfully told the manager he was just getting in the way and to please let him look around. Geld was stunned into silence, and let out a panicked squeak. Takir privately sized up the man, guessing he was the type to be easily managed by his wife. As they stepped inside, the workshop manager's furious voice echoed through the space. He was berating a craftsman, roaring that a piece of work was unacceptable for a customer and must be redone. The craftsman could only apologize as Takir and announce their arrival. He watches the tense scene, not with fear, but with an odd sense of nostalgia, and whispers her unease about the hostile atmosphere. But Takir simply reassures her that it's fine, quickly dismissing his own feelings as nothing. This feeling stems from a memory of his past life, where a demanding boss would furiously declare that the only answer was yes, and remarks that while she isn't happy about it, she's used to such environments. Takir internally likens the workshop to a black company, a toxic workplace from his former world. The next day, Takir returns. Geld, the workshop manager, observes him with curiosity, wondering what kind of young master would be so unfazed by the charged atmosphere he had witnessed. He voices his surprise, asking why Takir has come again, having assumed the boy would be bored after a single visit. Geld then mentions Takir's maid, whom he calls the Ice Lady, noting that she has always been protective of him. The scene flashes back to the previous day's confrontation. The berated craftsman, far from defeated, declares that he won't give up. Takir, watching the intense exchange, concludes that it is not the right moment to approach anyone. The craftsman, his hands full, tells someone that he will wait until he is free to talk, his voice strained with frustration. He then turns to Takir, asking him to identify which piece of lumber is the hardwood. In the background, another worker worries aloud about their looming delivery date and how they will manage to meet it. The craftsman's face is tight with stress. Geld watches the exchange silently before letting out a quiet, thoughtful sigh, while Takir remains perfectly composed. After a moment of silence, the craftsman addresses the boy respectfully as young master, prompting him for an answer. Takir clenches his small fist. He considers simply playing along with a casual chat, but decides against it. Seizing the moment, Geld leans in close, his expression serious, and asks directly if Takir is interested in woodworking. He considers the workshop manager's question. His purpose here is different from simple interest. He has something he absolutely must create, and woodworking is the only path. He realizes that if he frames it as a mere hobby, he won't be taken seriously. With determined resolve, he shouts his affirmative answer. The forceful reply catches Geld by surprise, his eyes widening. After a moment, the manager simply says, "I see." From that day forward, Takir became a near-constant presence at the workshop. A development is made, and observes in silence. His visits became a daily routine. He would arrive, full of energy, cheerfully greeting the manager as boss. Geld would remark on the young master's vigor, and Takir would promise to stay out of the way. Through these interactions, a rapport began to form between them. He also found that he got along well with the other craftsmen, who were kind to children, a fact that felt slightly awkward given his true mental age. Having built this foundation of trust, he decides it is finally time to reveal his project. He presents his plans to Geld. The manager stares at the paper, completely baffled by the design. "Young master," he asks, his voice filled with confusion. "What in the world is this?" The confusion spreads through the workshop. One of the craftsmen, Carl, questions how they are supposed to create a round shape like the one depicted. Takir specifies his requirements, explaining that he needs the object to be made from strong wood that is resistant to decay. Observing the scene, and comes to a quiet realization. The young master's project is not going well, and he cannot do it alone. Seeing the impasse, Geld calls for Carl. He turns to Takir, explaining that while Carl is young, he shows promise and can be of assistance. With a gentle smile, Carl formally introduces himself to the young master, extending his hand in greeting. He shook hands firmly with the young master, expressing his pleasure at the meeting. With the arrangements settled, Takir bid his parents farewell. As he departed, his mother noted her son's unusual dedication, and his father agreed that since it was what Takir wanted, they should let him continue his daily visits to the workshop. His visits continued for the next 3 months. He and Carl worked closely, with Takir providing detailed instructions and Carl meticulously bringing the design to life. As his parents began to discuss the matter, the project, a model far too large to be a simple child's plaything, was finally finished, much to the delight of both Takir and the young craftsman. A few days after the model was finished, Takir arranged a presentation in the courtyard. Feeling a bit tense, he coughed lightly before formally thanking his mother and father for attending. His gratitude, however, was cut short by the sight of an unexpected guest, making him wonder why someone else was there. He stammered, momentarily losing his composure as the man, Raymond, politely requested to participate, stating that if it was all right, he would also like to listen to Takir's proposition. His mind raced, recalling the man's identity. Raymond was the house steward, in charge of internal affairs and management, second in authority only to the Baron and his wife. He had served the house since before Takir's mother had married into the family. The pressure was intense. Takir felt a surge of gratitude for the steward's interest, but the truth was, in his previous life, he hadn't liked Raymond at all. He recalled how, when his parents were still alive in his past life, he had brought suggestions to Raymond, who was always able to find where they fell short. Whenever that happened, Takir could never give him a satisfactory answer. Though Raymond did ultimately accept and implement his proposals in the household's affairs, the experience always left Takir's heart feeling as if it would break. The steward was a refreshing, capable man who did his job well and listened to his master's orders. He was so competent, in fact, that he had quite a lot of admirers among the maids. Takir reflected that Raymond possessed all the qualities of a popular character, right down to the mole under his eye, a level of popularity Takir himself couldn't recall ever having. The realization made him squirm. He wondered if a small part of the reason he had disliked Raymond was simply because he was jealous of the man's popularity. He pushed the thought aside. Despite the feeling of inferiority he had when facing him, he knew that Raymond was one of the people he could trust without a doubt. What was truly important now was what was inside the model. With his resolve hardened, Takir gestured towards the large, covered object before him. He called to his maid, and please. Then, addressing the small audience, he announced, "Then, I'll be starting," and simply replied, "Yes." He dramatically unveils the large, intricate model, its complex gears and levers now fully visible. With a confident voice, he announces his presentation. His expression then shifts to one of intense focus as a single thought solidifies in his mind. To change history, he absolutely needs Raymond on his side. His determined gaze locks onto Raymond, who meets the look with a cool, knowing smirk. The young master's resolve crystallizes into a firm decision. He will make the capable steward his ally, starting at this very moment. The maid, and reflects on the young master, Takir, whom she considers a creepy child. She recalls that ever since he was very young, he had always regarded her with a strangely frightened and cautious gaze. Furthermore, his manner of speaking felt unnatural. It seemed intentionally clumsy, a calculated act that she perceived as cunning. Despite this unsettling nature, she acknowledges a strange paradox. He always managed to get along with those around him, from the common people on the streets to the skilled merchants who visited the mansion for business, effectively turning them all into his allies. Her thoughts reveal her own calculated move. Driven by curiosity, she had arranged to be assigned as a maid apprentice to Takir instead of to the eldest son, Derek, as was originally planned. She also tasked another with providing daily reports on Takir's affairs. Meanwhile, the butler Raymond observes from a window as Takir and stand outside. He reflects that calling the young master's project unusual would be a profound understatement. He continues to watch as Takir oversees an invention of a kind Raymond has never witnessed before. A sudden realization strikes the butler. The device being built before him might just be the key to saving their entire territory. Nearby, Derek and a young girl gaze at the completed contraption. The girl clasps her hands, exclaiming that it's amazing, while a bewildered Derek asks what the large object could possibly be. Their questions are directed at Takir, who stands proudly before his work. He explains that he has built two devices. One is a lifting water wheel, and the other is a powering water wheel. The term water wheel echoes in Derek's mind, a concept new to him. To clarify, Takir gestures toward the mechanism. He announces that he will first explain the function of the lifting water wheel, drawing their attention to its series of attached buckets. He begins the demonstration. The wheel is submerged into a basin, and the water current causes it to spin. As it rotates, the buckets lift the water, which then flows out from a trough at a higher elevation than its source, and watches intently as the water splashes and flows, the principle proven before her eyes. He continues his demonstration, explaining the second part of his invention, a powering water wheel. Like the first, it is driven by the river's current, but its gears are designed to interact with a mechanism on the ground, converting the wheel's rotation into horizontal movement. The onlookers watch, impressed by the ingenuity. While the device operates, Derek admits his complete confusion, feeling like a parent observing a child's complex science project. The young blonde girl, Quirce, however, is utterly smitten, wondering what to do now that Takir has proven so amazing. She internally chides Derek for his old-fashioned thinking. Takir, with a final burst of excitement, clarifies the function of the first wheel. He explains that this lifting water wheel allows them to pump water to a higher elevation than the river naturally reaches. His words strike, and with sudden clarity. She immediately understands the implication. Water can now be delivered to higher ground, making it possible to cultivate the barren land that was previously unusable due to a lack of water access. The realization spreads to Raymond as well. Both he and now see that this is far more than a child's toy. Takir continues, explaining that the powering water wheel can automate strenuous tasks previously done by hand. He then asks them how useful they believe this will be. The strategic importance of this invention becomes apparent. The granaries of the Estel territory are all concentrated in one central area. Should this single point fail, for any reason, the damage to the region would be immeasurable. Increased production and automation are matters that directly impact the territory's economy. Raymond, addressing Takir, observes that it is as if the boy already knows one of the greatest problems the territory faces. He demands to know where Takir obtained this knowledge. The boy cheerfully replies that he read it in a book about how other kingdoms use such things. He beams, adding that he thought applying it in the Care Kingdom could benefit their territory's development. Raymond is left speechless, a single bead of sweat trickling down his temple. He is stunned by the realization that this person, this child, possesses an almost unbelievable level of foresight, and watches him, a profound realization forming in her mind. She understands that his actions are not driven by childish curiosity or the thrill of a challenge. To her, it seems as if he knows the dangers they are about to face and is doing everything in his power to avert them. She gazes at his back, framed by the silhouette of the massive wheel. It appears to her that, without anyone realizing it, the young Master Takir is carrying a great and heavy burden on his small shoulders. As Takir's explanation settled, Raymond considered the young master's position. He knew that Takir was still just a child, with limits to what he could accomplish alone. There would be times when adults wouldn't take him seriously. With that realization, Raymond resolved that it was his duty to support him from the shadows. He clenched his fist in quiet determination, a gesture that did not go unnoticed. Takir, seeing his attendant's resolve, spoke up to bring his attention back to the matter at hand. With a bright expression, Takir thanked Raymond. He then addressed the group, proposing that they should proceed with a detailed review of the water wheel's design and increase production. And Derek readily agreed, acknowledging that things were about to get very busy. With a gentle smile, Raymond affirmed his complete support, addressing the young master with formal respect. The display of unity solidified Anne's resolve as well. her expression hardening with determination. With Raymond's strong support, inspections of the installation site began the very next day. A few months later, the workshop was flooded with a huge order for water wheels, receiving deliveries one after another. Meanwhile, Takir's father worked to find buyers for the new business venture, while his mother, Raymond, and were fully occupied with land development and irrigation projects. As these plans unfolded, Takir felt as though an arrow meant to change history had just been loosed from its bowstring. He clenched his fist, steeling himself. Now, they would overcome the 5 calamities. A few more months passed, bringing the territory closer to the great harvest. At the dinner table, Takir ate with a ferocious intensity, his mind consumed with a single thought. There was no way he would lose. His determination boiled over as he silently roared his defiance against a mere famine. This fierce resolve was backed by tangible progress. Following the water wheel presentation, land development and irrigation projects had quickly begun. Construction of the milling facilities for the powering water wheel was also underway. Yet, Takir knew that before the great harvest, there was still one more thing he had to do. His strategy was not merely to prepare for the next bad harvest, but to capitalize on the present good one. With the price of wheat and other grains having dropped due to the barony's great harvest, he intended to stockpile as much as possible. This was also a method to earn money for future disasters, buying low now and selling high later. To do so, however, he needed a valid reason to purchase such a large quantity. He realized he would have to introduce a new product to justify the demand. The product he conceived was a preserved food made from wheat, dried noodles. They could be stored for an extended period and cooked easily with just hot water. With his idea clear, he went to the kitchen of the Solis estate. He cheerfully greeted the head chef, Miguel San, who seemed surprised but pleased to see the young master back again. Miguel San was a former soldier who had fought alongside Takir's father. Despite the harsh conditions of the battlefield and lack of proper ingredients, his specialty was cooking delicious meals. After being wounded, he accepted the Baron's request to become the head chef. Takir approached the chef, explaining that he was trying to figure out how to preserve the large amount of wheat flour they would soon have. Miguel listened, intrigued by the boy's strange request, noting that he had once again brought him an odd project after the time he'd asked about needing flour, water, and salt. He then presented the dried noodles, suggesting that if the preservation method worked, it could even be useful on the battlefield. A look of realization dawned on Miguel's face. As the chef considered the possibilities, Takir reflected on a hard-learned lesson. He knew that possessing knowledge of past and future technologies was useless on its own. He had learned at just 5 years old that he couldn't accomplish most things by himself. To change history, he had to borrow the help of professionals. And so, the two began weeks of grueling experimentation, trying every possible technique to mix, salt, and dry the noodles. Since his parents forbade wasting ingredients, Takir was forced to eat every failed, tough batch. Finally, after many attempts, he tasted a successful one. It was good. He beamed with triumph. Thanks to Miguel San's help, he had perfected the new product just in time for the great harvest. He chews thoughtfully, a grimace forming on his face. While the noodles are good, he realizes a critical flaw. Since the Care Kingdom is landlocked, finding ingredients for a proper soup stock is difficult. Worse, he had completely forgotten about the seasoning, as staples from his old world like soy sauce and miso simply do not exist here. As he puzzles over the problem, his mother, Quirce, and Derek voice their eagerness to taste his creation. Their enthusiasm only adds to his pressure. He needs one more thing, a unique selling point that will convince even his pragmatic father of the project's value. As his mother also chimes in, wanting a taste, an idea suddenly strikes him. With newfound determination, a confident grin spreads across his face. He now knows exactly what he needs to do, holding up his tools and a section of bamboo. His plan centers on bamboo. A vast bamboo forest lies to the south of the Estel territory, serving as a border with the demon realm. Because people believe that if the bamboo spreads, so will the monsters, it is regularly cut down, making it abundant. He envisions using a section of bamboo not just as a storage container, but as a cooking vessel as well, the birth of cup noodles in this new world. The process is simple. A portion of bamboo is cut and hollowed out, then stuffed with the dried noodles. Water and Miguel San's special seasonings are added, and the entire container is heated over a fire, allowing the noodles to become swamped in flavor. Despite the simple concept, the execution proved difficult. He recalls a moment of intense frustration, having made a careless mistake that required Miguel San's help. But in the end, their collaboration paid off. The cup noodles were a success. Beaming with pride, he holds up the finished product. This is his selling point, a perfect item for wartime logistics and a disaster stockpile. He is certain his father will be surprised. With a clatter, he prepares to open one, but a sudden realization stops him cold. He stares in horror. It can't be. The contents are covered in mold. The truth dawns on him with crushing weight. The moisture inside the fresh, green bamboo ruined the dried noodles. While dry bamboo would be perfect, any other material would simply burn. Defeated, he collapses, wondering how to find a cheap, easily accessible alternative. He looks up at the sky, wistfully wishing for a material like styrofoam to simply appear. Despite this setback and the lingering disappointment, months passed. The year of the great harvest finally arrived, but with it came something far more ominous. The beginning of the prophesied 5 calamities. In a vast field of wheat, a farmer looks toward the sky and remarks that it seems they will have a good harvest this year. A woman beside him expresses her hope that things do not worsen, while a young boy, Takir, voices his own anticipation for the autumn harvest. The man's attention is then caught by something on a stalk of wheat. He identifies it as volcanic ash from Griffonia, prompting the woman to repeat her worried sentiment. From inside a building, a 6-year-old Takir watches the ash fall, his expression serious. He recognizes the event as an ominous sign. The ash fall is indeed from a volcanic eruption in the neighboring Griffonia Empire. For Takir, this is a long-awaited event. He turns from the window as his maid and announces that it is nearly time for his proposal meeting. He thanks her, resolving internally to use this ash fall as the perfect opportunity to push his plan forward, believing that a sense of crisis is necessary for his next move. Takir knows that while historical records suggest the ash fall will be brief and harmless, it will actually be followed by an unprecedentedly poor harvest the next year. This impending disaster contrasts sharply with the fact that the current year is set to have an exceptionally large harvest. He considers the political landscape. The Solis barony has grown quickly, but the neighboring Gorman and Hyarimi Viscounties are not allies, creating a tense atmosphere. He cannot expect aid from them or other territories. His plans for mass-producing flour and preserved food are underway, but he knows it will not be enough. Walking with and, Takir hardens his resolve. He understands they must survive the coming poor harvest on their own. Their only friendly neighbor, the Cornell barony, prioritizes its own agriculture, and a war in the south prevents Griffonia from offering support. Failure here means losing all hope of overcoming the future calamities. With a firm, "Let's go," they proceed. He arrives at the Solis barony's assembly room. As Takir steps inside, the men gathered around the table, his father, Derek, and Raymond, turn to face him, their expressions serious. A wave of anxiety washes over him. He thinks to himself that this is far more nerve-wracking than his presentation on the water wheel. It is a stark realization. At only 6 years old, he already holds a position where he has a say in the territory's most critical affairs. He reflects on the barony's current affluence, attributing it entirely to his parents' efforts. When his father received the land, it was an undeveloped territory with only small towns and villages, lacking any specialized fields. He recalls how his father, a space mage, holds the rare ability to store vast amounts of items in a different dimension. His mother, meanwhile, possesses a special gift for land quality appraisal and can find and watch over mines, increasing their assets. Takir acknowledges that thanks to their combined efforts, the Estel territory's development is said to be even faster than that of the Gorman Viscounties. As he considers his parents' incredible achievements, Derek approaches him with a smile. Derek congratulates Takir's father, noting that all the subjects are pleased with the expected great harvest. Takir, however, remains preoccupied, wondering if they will accept his proposal. The Baron, however, shares a different concern. He knows that even a great harvest presents a problem, as the excess is usually sold off. Farmers pay taxes with their grain, then secure seeds and food for the next year, leaving the remains as their earnings. In times of good harvest, the price of grain drops immensely, decreasing the farmer's earnings. This affects the feudal lord as well, as the value of their tax income also falls. In response to this very problem, Takir steps forward, holding a document. He declares his belief that this great harvest will be a great boon instead. He has brought a proposal that may address the problems arising from an abundance of crops. Derek, intrigued, asks Takir to elaborate, while Raymond observes, sensing that the young master is planning something again. He begins with his first proposal, which concerns dried noodles. He suggests that now, with grain prices dropping, is the perfect time to acquire them and produce preserved food. He asks how stockpiling dried noodles for a food crisis sounds. He reveals that they are also developing ways to use these noodles on the battlefield, a project currently underway. His mother nods in agreement, and Takir adds that he is also considering employing farmers whose earnings have fallen short, providing them with work. Seeing their receptive expressions, he realizes that everyone has likely already considered this problem. With confidence, he prepares to move on to his next point. Now, for the next one, he announces. His second proposal is to create a system called the ever-normal granary. During years of good harvest, they will store the surplus grain instead of selling it. This system would reduce the amount of grain flooding the market, preventing prices from suddenly falling and stabilizing the farmers' earnings. The farmers would sell their surplus grain to the ever-normal granary at a stable, usual price, while the barony buys the excess. He continues his presentation, explaining that with the ever-normal granary, farmers' earnings will remain stable, and the surplus grain can be stored without additional cost. Raymond, listening from the side, finds the idea quite interesting. His words seem to convince Derek, who concedes that the plan doesn't sound half bad and will likely foster loyalty among the populace. Relieved, Takir mentally thanks Raymond for the crucial assist. With their attention now fully captured, he prepares to reveal the heart of the matter, his third and final proposal. He reveals his theory, stating that small-scale ashfall can be a precursor to a large volcanic eruption, a claim he supports by mentioning several books he has read on the subject. He connects this geological prediction to their current situation, arguing that if a large eruption occurs in a neighboring country, their own harvest will fail. This presents an opportunity to stockpile grain now, while prices are low. Internally, he frets that citing books is a weak argument, but knows he cannot reveal his knowledge of the future, instead relying on his strong conviction that the odds are high. The mention of a poor harvest visibly troubles Derek. Sensing their skepticism, Takir makes a desperate appeal. He explains that he has worried about this for years, but lacked a convincing reason to act. He argues that even if the disaster doesn't strike, commercializing their stored goods will still be a huge boon. He pleads with them to trust him. His plea intensifies as he leans forward over the table, his face strained with emotion, begging them to believe him. The room falls silent. An unseen listener's gaze is fixed on the boy, their thoughts consumed by a single name, Takir. A soft tapping sound breaks the quiet as a foot taps rhythmically against the floor, a sign of contemplation. The tension is suddenly shattered as Krishia joyfully leaps onto Takir's back, wrapping him in a hug and exclaiming how truly incredible he is. He is startled from his thoughts as his mother, and pulls him into a warm embrace. He stammers her name in surprise as she holds him close, her eyes closed in a gentle smile. She reassures him, telling him she can see how much thought he put into his proposal and that they will handle whatever comes their way. Her words bring him immense relief, and he burrows into her embrace, a sense of security washing over him. Moments later, the embrace ends. Derek looks down at Takir with a slight smile, announcing that it appears their plans for the afternoon have changed and suggesting they wrap up the meeting. After the meeting concludes, Takir walks alongside his father. He reflects internally that he has finally managed to show filial piety, or at least he hopes he has. This success triggers a flood of memories of his past life's failures. He wonders if his shortcomings stem from feeling inferior to his brilliant family, or if he was simply too afraid to try his best, running away until he reached a point of no return. He realizes that despite receiving so much from them, he was never able to give anything in return and lost the chance to see them again. In that, his past self, Nishida Takahiro, was no different. The memories become more vivid. As Nishida Takahiro, he lived an insignificant life as a salaryman in Japan with his beloved wife, Yukiko. His career path was derailed when a colleague stole his work, and he eventually became a middle-aged NET, relying on his wife's kindness. Even after he lost his job, Yukiko encouraged him, telling him he would become someone amazing one day and should take a leap of faith. A particularly painful memory surfaces. When Yukiko woke from her coma, her worried expression shattered him. He couldn't help but curse himself for his powerlessness. He remembers pushing himself, working despite being nearly 50 years old. But in the end, he was the one who collapsed, leaving his wife behind. The weight of that final failure crashes down on him. He recalled his past self, standing frozen on crumbling ground, paralyzed by the familiar fear of taking that first step. He had always run away, never standing his ground, and by the time he finally decided to act, it was always too late. This time, however, is different. Though he is just a child, he carries the heavy burden of his past regrets and the desperate wishes of those he left behind, all swirling within him. His gaze hardens with determination. He can change, he realizes. He will do it one step at a time. As his resolve solidifies, time marches on. The season turns to autumn in the Care calendar's 499th year, and the time for harvest rapidly approaches. Fields of grain, heavy and golden, stand ready, a tangible sign of the season's culmination. In the Care calendar, year 499, the great harvest finally arrived. Takir noted that the wheat in this world matured a little later than in his old one. At first, the farmers expressed joy over the unprecedented yield, but their celebration soon turned to concern as they began to worry about the inevitable decline in market prices. However, preparations had already been made. Takir's mother, and the attendant Raymond took the initiative, ordering the construction and implementation of an ever-normal granary to calm the peasants. Soon, more granaries were built, one after the other. Takir was pleased they had believed him, even if they might have already been considering a similar solution. As a result of these measures and the market's natural course, the price of grain soon plummeted, just as was recorded in the history of Baron Solis that Takir remembered. As for his father, he had other plans in motion. More powerful water wheels were installed in various locations to begin processing large quantities of dried noodles. The very farmers with reduced earnings were then hired to man these facilities, allowing the mass production of preserved food to progress smoothly while the barony bought their grain at a price above the current market rate. For Baron Solis, his time had come. Though initially skeptical, the second ashfall convinced him that this was the perfect investment opportunity, and he committed to the plan completely. His good mood was palpable. Derek observed that ever since the market crash, the Baron had been running all over the territory with a distinct glint in his eyes. Takir realized this was the moment where his space-time magic, with its spatial storage, would truly shine. Derek explained the full scope of the Baron's strategy. On the surface, he was buying wheat to support the local market. In truth, he was also secretly buying out massive quantities of cheap wheat from other territories, carefully hiding the Solis barony's involvement. He was already planning to sell the preserved food to the capital's knights. Takir was stunned, wondering when his father found the time for such intricate maneuvers. Derek concluded that the Baron was utterly ruthless, or rather, flawless. The Baron's good mood was evident when he called Takir into his office one day. He declared that if their earnings from the wheat and preserved food increased, he would give Takir a 10% share. Stunned, Takir asked if it was true. When his father confirmed, Takir, overjoyed, accepted it as a promise without a second thought, realizing he was recreating a scene from a light novel he once liked. His father was visibly taken aback by the boy's earnest reaction. The Baron smiled, stating that such a reward was only natural for a lord to bestow. Internally, Takir felt a pang of conflict, wondering if it was truly all right for a lord to be so happy about dropping grain prices. He rationalized that his father acted completely different on the outside, so it must be fine. Bowing lower and lower, he excused himself and scurried away. Nearby, the maiden remarked that, as expected, only a twin made with short blue hair could pull off such a thing. He listens as Derek remarks that, for the good of the territory, it is acceptable to let someone continue leaving the city. The idea of venturing outside the city walls resonates with Takir, who quietly muses that it sounds nice. The thought quickly solidifies into a plan. He realizes that an excursion would be the perfect opportunity to prepare his third arrow. Acting on this resolve, he approaches his family to ask if he can join the on-site inspection of the granaries. His mother, and immediately objects, pointing out that at only 6 years old, it isn't safe for him to go outside. Derek supports her, adding that it's not a task the Lord's son should concern himself with. He presses his case, pleading with his father and mother to let him go. When Baron Solis asks for his reasoning, Takir explains with a maturity beyond his years. He states that to one day support his older brother and manage the territory's internal affairs, he must understand the subject's perspectives. Though he proposed the granary idea, he doesn't know how the people truly feel about the policy forced upon them and believes listening to them is a necessary step. Baron Solis turns to Derek, questioning the timing of Takir's sudden request. Derek observes that regardless of their justifications, the fact remains that their strategy exploits the farmers' fears. Takir interrupts their deliberation, his voice ringing with conviction. He declares that he needs to see with his own eyes how the people truly view their actions. As he speaks, he realizes he has dropped his childish facade. This is the voice of the adult mind within him. His mother, and leans in close, a playful smile on her face. She gently asks if that is his only reason for wanting to go. Takir is caught completely off guard by her perception. He reels internally, trying to decipher her smile. Was his reasoning flawed? Was his desperation too obvious? He stammers, unable to form a coherent response, while his mother's gentle smile remains, indicating that his argument was not enough to convince her. Breaking under the gentle pressure, he blurts out a more honest, childish reason. He exclaims that he also wants to see the outside world and the land of Estel that his parents have developed, complaining that it's unfair that only his older brother gets to go. His mother lets out a soft laugh, finding his outburst endearing. "That's more like it," she says. Takir is instantly mortified, realizing he blurted out the first excuse that came to mind. The man of over 70 years trapped in a child's body finds the situation deeply embarrassing. He realized he had approached the situation from the wrong angle, as his mother, and readily gave her permission for him to venture out of town. She stipulated, however, that he must go with Raymond and the maid, and for his own safety. While Takir stammered in surprise, his father looked on, utterly aghast. As the Baron reeled, Quirce pointed out that this was all happening because he kept going out with Derek on his own. Flustered, the Baron addressed her as Quirce, telling her she couldn't just say things so suddenly. He clutched his head, conceding that he understood the feelings of a younger brother wanting to imitate his older sibling. Yet, he hesitated, struggling to voice the rest of his thought. Before he could finish, Quirce had cut him off with a menacing smile, questioning if he was unsatisfied with her decision and threatening consequences if he dared to go against her. Seeing this, Takir quickly affirmed his father's choice as correct and warned both him and Quirce not to cause trouble. With the matter settled, his plan to join the inspection was a success, and the family gathered to see him off. As he prepared to depart, his mother suddenly grabbed him in a tearful embrace, wailing his name. She reminded him that travel is not guaranteed to be safe, even within their own territory, due to the monsters and bandits that run rampant. He internally sighed, apologizing for the extra trouble. He knew that because he was the young son of the Lord, they had no choice but to increase the number of guards for his protection. His permission was limited. He was only allowed to accompany the party to the 3 nearest villages, a journey that could be completed in a single day. Even so, he was happy just for the chance to go out of town. From a carriage window, he waved a cheerful goodbye to his parents. He reflected that, thanks to Raymond's instructions, all of the inspections had gone smoothly. He recalled, however, a blunder he made in the first village. While trying to explain his ideas, he had accidentally pointed at a low-built structure and shouted that a single flood would be enough to knock it down. Fortunately, Raymond had managed to convey his true intentions much more diplomatically at the next village. Having returned, he called out to his parents. He mused that the final countermeasure against the bad harvest, his third arrow, was already showing results. He had discussed it with Raymond on the way, and the inspection had concluded safely. He was sure both Raymond and the maid, and would keep his on-trip rampage a secret. In the late autumn of year 499, he proudly presents a large, freshly picked turnip, his eyes sparkling with excitement as he urges his family to look at his wonderful discovery. His audience, Baron Solis and Quirce, are left momentarily speechless, their expressions blank with confusion at the boy's enthusiastic display. Surveying the newly converted garden plot within a mansion grounds, the Baron dryly remarks to Quirce that they seem to have become farmers, and that Farmer Baron will soon be added to his list of titles. Wiping his brow, Takir explains that he has resorted to using turnips to combat a potential food shortage, noting what a waste it is that they are only used for animal feed. He elaborates on his choice, explaining that turnips are easy to grow, delicious, and even their leaves are edible. He recalls a historical precedent from his past life's knowledge, mentioning that the famous military strategist Zhuge Liang grew them to feed his troops. To put his plan into motion, he had already taken several steps. He asked his father to use his contact to acquire turnip seed from visiting merchants, went through his mother to request that the head chef Miguel San develop new recipes, and tasked Raymond with investigating local cultivation methods. Now, with his desk covered in turnips, he begins the next phase, compiling all the information he has gathered. His goal is to distribute this knowledge along with the seeds throughout the territory, especially to prepare for times of poor harvest. His research wasn't purely academic. He had also been testing the cultivation methods himself. After tripping while working in the garden, his guard, the maid, notices dirt on his face and gently wipes it clean, causing a flustered Takir to thank her. The narrative shifts forward to the spring of year 500, a time recorded as the omen of destruction. In the town of Est, under a sky made pitch black by the mountain god's rage, a young boy asks his mother if the darkness is permanent. She reassures him, certain the Lord's blessings will save them. After a month, the sun finally returned. Though the people rejoiced at the return of sunlight, a new dread soon took hold. From that day on, rain never fell again. As the land dried and crops began to die, unease crept back into their hearts. But the boy's mother did not overlook even these small signs of growing concern. On the ground, Quirce directs the emergency response with authority. She orders the lifting water wheels to be run at full capacity and the water gates opened to irrigate the land. While acknowledging the threat of the bad harvest they were warned about, she cautions that they must also manage the flow carefully, as they are not the only people who rely on the river basin. She then turns to Raymond, instructing him to continue gathering information from other regions, no matter how seemingly insignificant. He acknowledges her with a formal, "Yes, Karisu-sama." Internally, Quirce reflects on how dire their situation would be without the water wheels and reservoir prepared by Takir. Her expression hardens with resolve. For now, she knows they must simply focus on the tasks at hand and do what is necessary. Meanwhile, in the assembly room, Takir learns that the measures have been successful. Reducing tax burdens and redistributing grain eased the people's minds. Announcements made by his mother and Raymond throughout the territory were met with cheers from farmers as water finally reached their lands. Takir confirms that this means their plans are proceeding well. Raymond further reports that some farmers are so confident that they believe they can manage simply by cutting back on living expenses. He cautions that they cannot lower their guard, but confirms they have leeway with their finances. Takir, surprised by the extent of their success, asks if they will truly get through the crisis. He accepts Raymond's assessment. Though scraps of information had suggested things were going well, he had remained uneasy until this very moment. A profound sense of relief washes over him as the reality sinks in. They have overcome it. His father, Baron Solis, heartily congratulates him, declaring that they will survive the winter thanks to Takir's efforts. He adds that the turnip cultivation plan is also proceeding smoothly. In fact, they not only averted a famine, but made a huge profit by selling surplus food to neighboring territories. Takir can only offer a hesitant agreement. Returning to his room after the meeting, he reviews the list of calamities in his mind. With the harvest crisis averted, only 2 of the 5 remain. He realizes the most urgent threat is now the border conflict predicted for the following year, which will bring with it the loss of soldiers and a severe financial burden. He lets out a deep yawn, suddenly exhausted now that the crisis is over. He muses on the dark humor of dying from overwork in one life only to face it again in another. As he prepares to rest, a voice from his father's office catches his attention. Listening at the door, Takir realizes why his father was acting strangely. Someone is calling him Turnip Baron. The nickname instantly irritates Takir, who feels it's his fault. He immediately retracts the thought, insisting it's not his fault at all. Probably. He remains outside the door, vexed. He strikes a thoughtful pose at his desk, causing his maids and her colleague to watch with curiosity. They wonder if he is preoccupied with his studies or perhaps diplomatic issues. Internally, however, Takir apologizes to them. His mind is on matters far less charming. His frustration boils over in a silent scream. He questions why this is happening. In the original history, disagreements with the Gorman Viscounty arose from high grain prices during a poor harvest. But now, his territory is self-sufficient. They even attempted to foster goodwill by providing free grain and low-priced turnips. Yet relations with the Western territory have only deteriorated. This turn of events brings to mind the tragic history of Baron Solis's family, whose light seems destined to fade. He recalls the story of his older brother, Derek, a powerful swordsman whose strength was not so different from his enemies. Derek's downfall came not from a fair fight, but from betrayal by his own allies. The knowledge that he has only 5 years until he loses a family member torments Quirce as he lies on his bed. As early winter of year 501 arrives, the consequences manifest. Refugees from the starving agricultural areas of the Gorman Viscounty begin to flood into the Estill territory. With the poor overwhelming the towns, resentment builds. It is clear that when winter truly sets in, the food crisis will peak for both territories. The weight of this new reality presses down on him. A dark thought flashes through his mind, to simply crush the Gorman Viscounty, but he quickly dismisses it. He realizes that not just his parents, but even the capable Raymond, are at their wits' end, as Viscount Gorman's hostile attitude remains unchanged. He walks through the manor, acknowledging the grim fact that the number of refugees is already growing. A month passes. From a window, he watches the world outside, the gears of fate turning relentlessly. Suddenly, he bursts into a room where his family is gathered. His mother discusses the rising security concerns in the city, while his sister Quirce cries out, startled by his abrupt entrance. Filled with purpose, Quirce announces he has a proposal and asks his mother to summon his father, who is already in the room. After listening to his idea, his mother's expression becomes one of firm resolve. She gives her full support, stating that by all means, they should proceed with his plan. Sometime later, in the town of Est, the plan is in motion. Hooded figures, the refugees from the neighboring lands, are being accepted and given shelter. From a window, Quirce observes the scene. He understands now that changing history inevitably creates new, unforeseen events. While logical, the situation with the Viscounts and the refugee influx serves as a stark reminder of this truth. He admits to himself that when he first proposed the idea, he had no real notion of how it would all turn out. He thinks back to a critical moment, realizing with dread that a confrontation with a figure known as Commander Weiss lies in his future. He identifies this as the worst possible omen, a death flag waiting for him just ahead. This grim premonition contrasts with a memory from a break at the workshop. As a boy, Quirce enthusiastically declares that having a drink after work is the best. The workshop manager, Geld, notes the young master's presence while lamenting that he himself really wants a drink. His exclamation about the working class causes confusion. Realizing his slip-up, Quirce quickly tries to backtrack, claiming it was just something his father said. Overwhelmed by the social misstep, he decides he can't handle the situation and should just go home for the day. He quickly announces his departure, leaving a puzzled and to watch him go. This behavior stems from his past life's habits. To an unfortunate degree, Quirce was part of the working class, and his ingrained tendencies, like clocking out with a time card, still surface, causing him embarrassment. In another moment, his focus is entirely different. He stares with unnerving intensity at someone off-panel. His gaze is fixed upon Raymond. The butler notices the scrutiny, realizing with a start that Quirce-sama has been watching him for some time. The butler feels the weight of that gaze, sweating slightly. He concludes that, as expected, Quirce must be contemplating something very important, possessing a look that seems to see through anyone. But Raymond's assumption is entirely wrong. Quirce's internal thought reveals the mundane truth. He wasn't thinking of anything important. He was simply admiring how handsome Raymond is and feeling a pang of jealousy. This trivial observation is quickly set aside, as the day has finally come for the proposal meeting. Standing beside, and Quirce steels himself, resolving to adopt the practiced, adult-like with no opening stance for the crucial event ahead. He remains with his head down on the table, prompting his mother to gently chide that she cannot see his face. She then prepares to address his first proposal. Later, he finds himself standing on a small stool as the maid, and kneels before him, seemingly to take measurements. He then slides down from the stool. He lands, his face flushed with embarrassment. He internally laments the awkwardness of the situation for a 6-year-old, before attempting to steer the conversation back to the main point. He turns to his mother and makes his case, stating that for now, he wants to try growing some turnips. He privately acknowledges that the conditions for getting his mother to grant his pleas are very strict. The maid, overhears this and cheerfully wonders aloud what they should do about it. Quirce, however, realizes with a grimace that this direct approach is not going to work. She then offers some advice, suggesting he can drop the formalities sometimes because his mother feels lonely. She encourages him to try calling her mama and to make sure he looks up at her. Her suggestions grow more enthusiastic. She tells him his serious expression is scary and proposes he also try adding a playful nine to his sentences, declaring the idea incredibly cute. Before he can react to her strange request, a bug buzzes near his head, startling him. He shouts in surprise. In this moment, working in the fields, he is described as a super combat maid. His surprise instantly escalates into panic. He and the maid cling to each other, both terrified of the insect, as he frantically asks if it stings and yells for it to get away. The tiny bug continues to menace him, and his carefully maintained composure completely shatters into a high-pitched scream of pure terror. His terror from moments before is instantly replaced by wide-eyed admiration. The maid, and calmly holds up a small stick, informing him that she has defeated the creature. Takir, deeply impressed, exclaims how cool it was and declares that he wants to be able to do that too. Just as Takir is admiring In's work, his father, Baron Solis, appears in the doorway. The Baron's face is cast in shadow, and he lets out a pained grunt, his expression one of deep anguish, while his son looks on cheerfully in the background. The young boy greets his father with a bright smile, welcoming him home after a 3-day absence. This cheerful reception does nothing to soothe the Baron, who is suffering from a peculiar affliction. His son has begun inserting the word turnip into every sentence, causing the nobleman immense distress. The Baron remains silent, his brow furrowed in misery. He continues his one-sided report, confessing that the previous day he had secretly tried on his father's hat. He explains that it was far too large for him, and in his desperation, he ended up with it covering his entire head. Each sentence is punctuated with his signature, turnip, unknowingly aggravating his father's turmoil as the Baron trembles with agitation. The Baron's composure finally shatters. He lunges forward, grabbing his son by the shoulders. His face is a mask of fury as he demands to know what Takir could possibly be talking about, accusing the boy of tormenting him on purpose. A young boy named Solis von Takir, the second son of Baron Solis from a remote southern territory in the Care Kingdom, introduces himself. He explains that, simply put, he is currently living his third life. His first life was as Nishida Takahiro, a salaryman in Japan who overworked himself to death, leaving his wife behind. His second life was as Takir, where he endured many calamities, lost his family in a war, and was ultimately executed. He believed that was the end, but it was not. Reborn as an infant, he was startled to see the reflection of his previous adult self staring back at him from a polished surface. The memory of his wife from his first life lingered in his mind as his small hand traced lines upon a slate, a gesture of longing for a past he could not reclaim. Now, in the Care calendar year 501, Takir is 8 years old. He stretches with a wide, satisfied grin, having just completed his assignments for the day. Eager to enjoy his freedom, he dashes down the stairs, only to be brought to a sudden halt as a hand firmly grasps his arm. He turns to find the maid, who has noticed he is heading out. She offers to accompany him, and he simply agrees. As-in moves to help him with his coat, addressing him formally as Takir-sama. He quickly waves her off, insisting that it's fine and he can do it himself. His departure is interrupted again when his older brother, Solis von Derek, grabs him from behind. Derek playfully calls him Ni-sama and teases him for being a prodigy who has already finished his work, asking if he's going out yet again. Derek continues, complaining that Takir is far too good at everything and should consider his position as the older brother. Flustered, Takir can only mutter in agreement. He recalled his admiration for his older brother from the previous history, a feeling often mixed with the sting of comparison. Derek had shown an amazing talent for the sword at 13, led his first campaign at 14, and by 16 his military achievements and fame had made even neighboring territories wary of him. His intense staring prompted Derek to ask what was wrong. Internally, Takir solidified his resolve. This was a future he absolutely had to change. He knew that if history proceeded unaltered, this beloved older brother of his would die in battle in just 5 years. Startled, Takir stammered that it was nothing. Derek, however, playfully pulled at his cheeks, dismissing the moment and guessing it was probably just another one of his little brother's secrets. With that, Derek ran off, promising to get him something tasty from the stalls on the way home. His departure revealed the scene behind him, the bustling, crowded grounds of the special refugee camp set up in the town of Est. As Takir watched the crowd, now accompanied by his maid, he remarked that the situation seemed to have calmed down greatly, and agreed, attributing the improvement to everyone's collective efforts. The territory of Estel had managed its own poor harvest by using preserved foods and instituting an ever-normal granary system, while also managing water resources with water wheels. However, the neighboring Hyarimi and Gorman Viscounties were not so fortunate. Last year, the southernmost border of the Care Kingdom was hit by natural disasters originating from the Griffonia Empire. First, ashfall from volcanic eruption, then a drought. The resulting famine drove refugees from those territories into Estel. To manage the crisis, the fourth of the proposed relief measures was enacted under the command of the House Steward, Raymond. Refugees who had been flooding different parts of the city were gathered into a single designated reception area within the lower city walls. There, they received all necessary support, including temporary housing and food distribution, with a warm soup made from dried noodles playing a significant part. Taking in the organized scene, Takir turned to and stated his intention for the day. He would first show his face at the reception desk, and simply nodded in understanding. At the refugee camp's reception desk, a staff member named Claire directed the arriving people. She instructed them to form an orderly line, explaining that everyone had to go through the registration process. With a welcoming expression, she asked each person for their name, gender, age, previous line of work, and the names of any companions, which she would then write down in a register. Her quill pen moved across the page as she recorded the details. She then asked for the person's place of origin, and they replied that they came from a village to the east of Estel. With a final tap of the pen, the entry was complete. At the reception desk, Claire finalizes a family's registration, handing them a token. She explains it's needed for the refugee camps and food distribution, then points them toward a bulletin board with job applications, noting that the camp itself was built by the refugees. The family expresses their gratitude. She then directs them to a consultation window for any issues and calls for the next person in line, receiving another thank you from the departing family. As she continues her work, a voice commends her efforts. Claire looks up, startled and flustered, to see Takir standing before her desk. She stammers a thank you, completely taken aback by the young master's sudden appearance. Before Takir can respond, two women employed at the reception desk rush forward, bowing deeply. They thank him profusely for saving their lives and providing them with paid work, wondering how they could ever repay him. Takir looks around in confusion, realizing with some alarm that word of the Solis Baron's child prodigy has begun to spread. Claire quickly intervenes, chiding the women. She reminds them that she already told them such displays were unnecessary, and that the best way to repay Takir is simply to do their jobs well. The women apologize. She then turns to Takir and apologizes for the commotion, explaining that word of his status and his role as the proposer of these initiatives has spread among the staff. Takir, looking slightly sheepish, internally reflects that he may have gone overboard. Walking with him, Claire provides a status report. She assures him that everything at the reception desk is going well and that the hired refugees are learning quickly, allowing them to handle an increasing number of tasks each day. With heartfelt sincerity, she tells Takir that the refugees are deeply grateful for the warm meals and the work he has provided. She then reveals a personal detail. Having grown up in an orphanage herself, being entrusted with such an important task is incredibly meaningful to her. Becoming flustered, she apologizes for getting carried away and starts to excuse herself to get back to work. Takir stops her, however, looking back with an encouraging smile. He tells her that he will be counting on her help in the future, too. Filled with a renewed sense of purpose, Claire looks up, her eyes shining with determination, and gives a firm, resounding yes. As Claire listened, Takir explained that the complex reception area was an absolute necessity to face the calamities to come. Agreeing with him, she watched as he declared it was time for them to help out as well. He led her away, noting that the line was getting long and they should move. He then mentioned that the registration tokens, made by Carl from the workshop, were created for a different purpose, with their most fundamental aim being to secure personnel. The tokens bore a bird crest and a unique number. Nearby, it was noted how well Claire was performing, to the point that she was even being considered as a candidate for a managerial position. Around that time, Takir observed a significant change in his surroundings, and the maid who once watched him closely had become as understanding of his cause as Raymond. He reflected that she no longer scolded him but looked at him with respect, despite him being 10 years her junior. In his heart, the ice lady no longer existed. His thoughts were interrupted as he and examined a newly arrived document. The refugee relief measures had seemed to be going well, but a problem had just appeared. An official notice from the Gorman Viscounty demanding the return of all refugees from their lands. This was a significant issue, as many of the refugees had come from the Gorman and Hyarimi Viscounties. While all had been given equal support regardless of background, the official notice meant they could no longer continue their current policies for those specific people. The refugees, however, were one step ahead. Derek explained the difficult compromise the Solis family had reached. Refugees from the Gorman Viscounty would be allowed to stay and receive food, but they could not be offered work. It was the best they could do under the circumstances. He continued, revealing that rumors about the situation had spread throughout the camp. Consequently, when it came time for registration, not a single person declared they were from the Gorman Viscounty. With no way to confirm their origins, the staff had to take them at their word, knowingly letting them through. A few days later, the plan was in full motion. Outside the reception area, a voice called out, inviting people to line up for food and registration. The speaker mused that it would be nice if everything went smoothly, knowing the truth. The rumors had been spread on purpose, so the refugees would be prepared. The speaker was Takir himself. He addressed the crowd, reassuring those from outside the Estel territory not to worry and to get in line. He explained that during registration, they would only be asked for their name and their town or village of origin. He was in the midst of managing the refugee reception when a voice cut through the noise, calling out, "Excuse me." Takir turned to face the speaker. The man was tall and wore a hooded cloak. He explained that he and his men were mercenaries formerly employed by the Gorman Viscounty and asked if it would be possible for them to receive a meal. Takir internally noted the man's direct honesty and weighed his options, considering the implications of helping mercenaries from a rival domain. With a grimace, the mercenary elaborated that their contract had been terminated. The Gorman leadership had dismissed them as useless mouths to feed. Upon hearing this, Takir's mind was made up. There was no problem at all. He offered a welcoming smile, acknowledging the hardship the man and his group must have faced. Takir then directed them to the reception desk to register, assuring them they would receive food immediately afterward. The hooded man was visibly taken aback by the unconditional acceptance. The mercenary's surprise softened into genuine gratitude. Looking directly at the young noble, he offered a simple, "Thank you," before adding with conviction, "I owe you one." A few hours later, while helping to clear away used dishes, Takir was startled by a familiar voice. He looked up to see the mercenary from earlier approaching him. The man confirmed what he'd heard at reception, that Takir was the feudal lord's son and the mind behind the entire relief operation. Takir chuckled, admitting that it might not seem like it, as he was always being scolded for not acting like a proper noble. His confirmation that the rumors were true seemed to deepen the mercenary's respect. The man apologized for his earlier haughty attitude, explaining he hadn't known who he was speaking to, and expressed his admiration for Takir's proposed relief measures. He then gently took the heavy basket of dishes from Takir's hands. With his hood now down, the man's sharp, intense features were clear as he made a formal introduction. "My name is Weiss Schwarzfock." Takir, despite his slightly disheveled appearance from working, returned the gesture. "I'm Baron Solis' second son, Takir. It's nice to meet you." Weiss then formally extended thanks on behalf of his entire 30-person mercenary group, the Doppelkopfiger Falcon, the two-headed falcon, for which he served as the newly appointed leader. He repeated the name aloud, a thoughtful murmur. Weiss Schwarzfock. With a gentle smile, he dismissed any need for thanks, adding that in times of trouble, it's important for people to stick together. In response, Weiss explained their plight. He admitted with some embarrassment that since the Gorman Viscounty issued a notice forbidding support to outsiders, his group had drifted through towns and villages, unable to secure food. As he listened, Takir felt a sense of familiarity with the name Black Hawk Weiss. The name echoed in his mind, but the connection remained just out of reach, leaving him with a puzzled expression. Suddenly, the memory struck him. The plates he was holding slipped from his grasp, shattering on the floor as an internal scream of pure shock ripped through his mind. His thoughts spun wildly as the pieces fell into place. He remembered now. The memory was from his past life's knowledge of the future. In 12 years, this man would become the Griffonia Empire's Black Hawk Weiss, the invincible general of the Northern Expeditionary Corps, destined to invade the Care Kingdom and occupy the Estel territory. The horrifying truth crashed down upon him. This was the very man who would have him executed. As Takir reeled from the revelation, Weiss knelt to help gather the broken plates, telling him not to push himself too hard. He tried to recall the day of his execution, but the memory was a blur. He had been in a daze when he surrendered, and his attention had been so fixed on another man's prominent beard that he couldn't even remember if Weiss had been present. Unaware of the storm raging in Takir's mind, Weiss looked at him with genuine gratitude. He declared that they wished to repay his kindness in any way they could, and that when the time came, Takir should feel free to contact him. Weiss's offer ignited a desperate plan. Takir knew exactly what he wanted. He silently pleaded, begging that for now, Weiss must not go to the Griffonia Empire. His mind reeled with the catastrophic revelation. This was an emergency situation of the highest order. As he stood over the man who would one day become his executioner, a single, frantic thought consumed him. He had to devise a countermeasure immediately before this fated path could solidify. In his study, the infant Takir slumps over his desk, a wisp of his soul comically escaping his body from the sheer stress. He announces the beginning of an emergency meeting, its sole purpose to figure out how to avoid his own death. His thoughts immediately drift to a pivotal figure from his past, Commander Weiss Schwarzfock, the Black Falcon. He was known as the Griffonia Empire's young and invincible general, a genius in both politics and war who had appeared like a comet. Weiss had been instrumental in the Third Prince's victory in the War of Succession, earning the prince's complete trust. He recalls the history of his previous life in the year 513, when he was 20 years old. It was then that he received an imperial command from the Third Prince, now the Emperor, to invade the Care Kingdom. Takir knew the shortest route to the southern gate was through the T-Gun settlement. Despite having limited forces, he resolved to fulfill his duty as a noble of his kingdom. His memory of the event sharpens as a soldier bursts in with a frantic report. A huge army, numbering over 5,000, was advancing on them from the demon realm through a narrow passage. Takir understood instantly. While the Empire's main force of 50,000 was supposed to be engaging the kingdom's 30,000, Weiss had secretly detached some of his troops. It was a bold flanking maneuver, deceiving both friend and foe to strike directly at the capital. He remembers the inevitable conclusion. He had intercepted them with a small force to buy time for the people of T-Gun to escape, but they were defeated. General Weiss claimed he would accept Takir's surrender and guarantee the lives and land of his subjects in exchange for his life. But Takir knew that soon after, Weiss would occupy Estel and have him executed. That was everything he knew from his past life's history. Returning to the present, Takir considers the mercenaries' plight. He reasons that even if they were stopped by the neighboring Hyarimi Viscounty, they would likely receive the same poor treatment. To reach the Empire from their current position, their only path is through the demon realm, forcing them to contend with its monstrous inhabitants. He recalls their leader's words about being treated badly in the Gorman Viscounty. From what he saw, the mercenaries were already weakened by hunger and fatigue. In his original timeline, there were no countermeasures from his town, so their arrival must have been unexpected. He concludes that despite the odds, they will ultimately make it to the Empire safely. Then, a horrifying realization dawns on him. Being treated so unfairly, losing their companions, that's more than enough reason for them to want to destroy everyone. The connection clicks into place with startling clarity. The Gorman Viscounty's actions are the direct cause of his future death flag. He remembers his father's voice, declaring that taking advantage of a natural disaster to speculate on food prices is a disgraceful act, unbecoming of a noble. With newfound determination, Takir clenches his tiny fists on the desk. He understands now. If they don't stop the mercenaries from going to the Empire, it will be the end for them all. He desperately searches his mind, questioning if there is anything he can do, but his mind draws a blank. Frustration overwhelms him as he collapses onto the desk, groaning in defeat. No matter how hard he thinks, he can't come up with a single idea. He looks out the window, a new determination hardening his expression. There is no other choice. He must act before the mercenaries leave town. To do so, he realizes he must make the most of his current form as a child. With a renewed sense of purpose, he marches forward, resolving to befriend the mercenary, Weiss. And so began his daily visits to the mercenaries, using the inspection of the refugee camp as a pretext. He makes his way toward a corner of the sprawling, makeshift settlement. With his maids in tow, he points ahead, instructing them to press a bit further into the camp. They dutifully agree. After some time, he concludes the morning's visit, politely thanking Weiss. The mercenary watches him, internally noting that a lord's son would normally be scolded for loitering in such a place. Before Weiss can turn away, Takir speaks up, explaining that he wants to discuss something he read in a book. When Weiss asks what it is, Takir brings up the long history of conflict between the Care Kingdom and the Griffonia Empire, asking if they would be safe from a sudden attack. Weiss listens, a slight smile forming as he finds the boy's serious concerns amusing. The question is a deliberate probe. Takir internally confirms that the current situation aligns with the history he remembers, recalling that Weiss's promotion to general came after his achievements in the war against the Suraduchi. Weiss explains that the mercenaries are heading to the Empire for work, as it's rumored the Empire won't invade the kingdom until that conflict is resolved. Takir visualizes the route and asks if Weiss is referring to the Southern Gate Fort. Weiss elaborates, confirming that capturing the Southern Gate Fort would require immense time and forces, a difficult task for any general. He adds that even if the local Marquisate fell, the kingdom's 30,000 knights and other powerful nobles would still stand in the way. Takir is relieved to hear this, understanding that the long supply lines and multiple forts make a direct invasion challenging. Though a direct assault seems unlikely, another possibility forms in his mind. He picks up a stick and begins to sketch in the dirt, thinking to himself, but what if this happens? His quiet, focused action draws Weiss's attention. The mercenary looks down, his curiosity piqued, as the small boy meticulously draws a diagram on the ground. He continues sketching in the dirt, pointing with his stick to a line he's drawn. He explains that this is the path to the capital, but notes it would be difficult to advance that way because of the powerful nobles in the region. He then indicates another area, identifying it as the Southern Gate Fort, watched over by Marquis Hasberg. With a sharp jab of the stick, he indicates a new location on his crude map, proposing a flanking maneuver. He suggests that a portion of the army could split off and travel through a narrow passage at the edge of the Hyarimi Viscounty, an area known as the Demon Realm. He elaborates that by launching a surprise attack on the Estel territory and moving through the Cornell barony, this force could march straight to the capital without needing to engage other lords or seize their fortresses. Weiss stares, his expression hardening with shock at the child's grasp of strategy. Switching back to a childlike demeanor, Takir explains he was just curious because he read something similar in a book and is now worried their land could become a battlefield. Weiss's intense stare unnerves him. The mercenary calls it a very interesting thought, then asks the young master why he believes such a plan would be enacted. Takir replies simply that it felt like the easiest route, all while internally calculating how to manage Weiss's perception of him. Weiss begins to systematically dismantle the idea, outlining 5 major difficulties. He states that it would require a large force, which is a weakness. The Imperial soldiers would not know the essential taboos for safely crossing the Demon Realm, and the undeveloped area would make establishing a supply line nearly impossible. He continues his assessment, pointing out the lack of roads and the certainty of monster encounters would make marching a large army unrealistic. He concludes that it is an impossible plan. Takir feigns agreement, but Weiss knows with chilling certainty that in 12 years, this exact strategy is what someone employs. Takir's mind drifts to his past life's knowledge. The commander who led that future attack, the Swift Black Falcon, was familiar with the terrain for when he crossed into the Empire. He knew the Demon Realm's secrets, timed his invasion for the harvest to secure food, and led a cavalry-centered force at astonishing speed. Returning to the present, Takir apologizes for bringing up something strange and worrying needlessly. Weiss dismisses the apology, saying the idea was eye-opening. Takir, however, knows the real key to that future invasion, the betrayal of his nemesis, a man he has yet to meet in this life, which is what allowed Weiss's forces to advance so readily. As if still pondering the strategy, Weiss adds one more thing. He posits that if the Empire were to try such a maneuver, they would need a defensive base to prevent an attack from behind. He states with conviction that if Marquis Hasberg were to pursue them, their complete annihilation would be inevitable. He considers the final piece of his analysis, murmuring to himself before concluding that the base would likely be on T-Gun Mountain. Before he can elaborate, Takir, with a triumphant cry of "I knew it," poses a direct question. If Weiss were the Empire's general, where would he establish his base? Without waiting for an answer, the boy excitedly explains that this is precisely how the invasion route was conceived. He points to a map, tracing the path from the Estel territory through T-Gun and the Demon Realm, noting that this was also their intended path to reach the border. This childish display masks a deeper resolve. Takir understands that this is not the time to befriend Weiss. Instead, he must borrow the power of the best strategist he knows. His thoughts drift to a recent conversation with his father, Baron Solis, who had asked him about the urgent matter he needed to discuss. In a well-appointed room, Takir apologizes to Raymond for taking up his time, explaining that he wants to present a proposal to his parents but still needs to work out the details. The butler, standing with a calm demeanor, assures the young master that he doesn't mind. Eager to proceed, Takir declares they should get down to it right away. He earnestly asks for Raymond's assistance, thanking him in advance. The butler gives an immediate, unspoken confirmation. Just as they are about to begin, the maid enters the room. She announces that she has brought some refreshments, catching Takir by surprise. Raymond, however, accepts the interruption with a gentle smile. He remarks that, as the saying goes, haste makes waste, seeing the value in a brief pause as a cup is set before them. Taking the butler's advice, Takir sips the warm beverage, finding it immediately soothing. The brief respite allows him to collect his thoughts as Raymond watches over him. Now, composed, he looks up with renewed focus. He states that there are two things he wishes to propose, prompting Raymond to ask for a brief outline first. Takir begins, explaining his first proposal concerns the future of the refugees. He acknowledges that maintaining the status quo is difficult, but since they sought the Solis family for help, it's an opportunity to accept them as new citizens and increase the territory's production power. Raymond listens intently before asking what Takir thinks and how he plans to integrate them. He has a specific answer ready. Takir suggests sending out a recruitment drive and establishing a new settlement on T-Gun Mountain. Raymond immediately questions this choice, asking why Takir believes T-Gun is the proper place. Feeling the butler's sharp perception, Takir explains that it's because the refugees are mostly from the Gorman and Hyarimi territories. He elaborates, pointing to a map. T-Gun is the perfect location because it is close to both of their former homes, yet remote enough to be hidden from their perspective. While bandits and monsters are a threat, T-Gun's natural defenses make it safe. He concludes by revealing his long-term goal, to use the settlement as a future base for exploring the dangerous but treasure-filled Demon Realm. Continuing their discussion, Raymond asks Takir if he is aware that the two-headed Falcon mercenary group is currently staying in EST. Takir confirms that he has heard, prompting Raymond to identify this as the second topic of discussion. Raymond elaborates, reminding Takir that the Solis family, being entrusted with guarding the border, has a duty to continuously strengthen their military. He argues they shouldn't miss the perfect chance to recruit such a group. Takir agrees, adding that he has spoken with them and can attest to their outstanding leader and powerful members. As Takir speaks, Raymond listens with a pensive expression. Takir connects this to his earlier proposal, explaining that they must hire guards to ensure the safety of the new settlement's people anyway. He notes that, fortunately, their recent speculation on grain provides them with some financial leeway. He then frames his idea as a way to kill two birds with one stone. The mercenaries would strengthen their overall fighting power while also guarding the settlement. He asks for Raymond's opinion. Raymond immediately raises the practical objection that hiring 30 people would cost a fair amount of money. Raymond's gaze is sharp as he asks if that is all Takir wishes to say. Takir gulps, realizing with some unease that Raymond is seeing right through the simple proposal to the complexities beneath. Despite his internal apprehension, Takir's expression shifts to a confident smile. He admits that he does have plans to offset the cost, internally surmising that Raymond has probably already received a report from Anne. He then explains his budget-balancing ideas. The mercenaries could be permitted to continue their normal duties, such as caravan escorting and monster hunting, alongside their duties to the barony, thus earning additional income and making the arrangement more feasible. Beyond the practicalities, Takir reveals a personal motive. He declares that the mercenary leader, Weiss, is trustworthy and renowned for his swordsmanship and military strategy. He passionately requests that Weiss become his personal instructor so he can learn about the sword and combat tactics. After hearing the full plan, Raymond agrees. He states that he understands and that there are no problems with the basic concept of the proposals. He confirms that, administratively, the plans can be presented to Derek and Quirce, but trails off with a significant however. Takir sighs, already anticipating the unspoken caveat. He knows they will first need to determine if Weiss is truly as trustworthy as he claims. Furthermore, he acknowledges it is likely too early to appoint the man as his instructor and that there's a high chance of that part being rejected. As he concluded his proposal, Raymond inquired about his future plans for the new settlement. He explained his ambition to develop and govern the land of T-Gun. It would become a settlement to support their economy and a base to protect the southern region of the Estel territory. He affirmed that as the second son, destined to support his older brother in the future, this groundwork was a matter he could not relent on. Hearing this resolute declaration, Raymond acknowledged his understanding and assured the young noble that he could leave the rest to him. The following day, in a meeting room, Takir's older brother, Derek, addressed him with a weary smile, remarking that he had heard about the latest proposal from Raymond and that it was just one thing after another with him. He then turned to his wife and, expressing his concerns, while acknowledging the barony's recent profits gave them some financial leeway, he pointed out that the scale of investment Takir's development plan required was unprecedented. He worried that if they proceeded, he might not be able to fulfill the 10% profit share he had promised. As Derek fretted, Quirce reminded him that their current financial success was thanks to Takir's proposal in the first place. Derek, still hesitant, voiced his concern about provoking the other Viscounties, but cut him off with a sharp, smiling expression. She declared that such political maneuvering was his responsibility to deal with, and had nothing to do with Takir. Her smile held an unspoken power. Internally, she chided her pitiful husband, reminding herself that she was the strongest one present. She recalled all the issues he had been worrying over, disagreements with the Viscounts, the refugee situation, and securing resources from the demon realm, as matters she could evidently handle. With the decision made, Derek delivered the verdict to Takir. He announced that the request for a swordsmanship instructor was rejected. Furthermore, the plan for Takir to govern the settlement would be put on hold until he turned 15. Derek then instructed them that Raymond would handle the remaining details, giving them leave to continue their talks. Before dismissing him, Derek presented a reward for his previous successful proposals. He informed Takir that he would be receiving 50 gold coins, emphasizing that this sum was comparable to several years of income for a commoner and should be used wisely. The sheer amount left Takir momentarily stunned. His eyes widened at the sight of the gleaming gold. He processed the immense value, 50 gold coins. He understood the unspoken message. Even for a noble child, this was a huge sum, and he was being trusted to use it as he pleased. His mind immediately began to strategize, earmarking the funds for his next arrow. Composing himself, he bowed deeply and asked to be excused. As he departed, he considered the outcome a success. While the rejection of his swordsmanship instructor request was unfortunate, the most important goal was to prevent the mercenary group from leaving. He felt confident that by entrusting the matter to Raymond, this could be achieved. He strode into the room, interrupting the ongoing discussion between Derek, Quirce, and his mother, and, apologizing for the sudden intrusion, he declared that the matter being discussed was related to him and requested permission to speak. His sudden appearance startled both Derek and Quirce. His bold declaration was followed by a moment of boyish uncertainty as he asked where he should stand. While Derek stammered his approval and gave her consent from her seat, a bad feeling about the situation already taking root in her mind. For a brief moment, he was struck by a sudden, jarring realization. The words "this is" formed in his mind as the full weight of what he was about to propose hit him. Steeling his resolve, he made his formal plea. "I would like to learn under the mercenary group's leader, Commander Weiss," he declared. "I plead for your consideration in this matter." The proposal landed like a thunderclap, leaving Derek and Raymond stunned by this unexpected form of reinforcement. Baron Solis regards his sons, his voice echoing in the Grand Room as he confirms their shared request. He asks if both Takir and Derek truly wish to learn under a mercenary group leader. The suddenness of the proposal startles Quirce, who turns to Derek and asks what has come over him. Derek remains silent, his expression firm, while Raymond observes the scene impassively. Takir, however, eagerly affirms the idea with a loud yes. He then asks Derek to elaborate on his decision for everyone to hear. He begins his explanation by outlining the known hierarchy of swordsmanship, which contains 9 distinct levels. These ranks range from the lowest, oblivious, through trainee, swordsman, veteran, sword expert, sword master, sword demon, and sword saint, all the way to the legendary pinnacle of sword god. He notes that practitioners generally have a sense of their own place within this structure. Derek then turns to his father, acknowledging that while the soldiers of the Solis barony are famed for their courage, few are truly proficient swordsmen. He asks the Baron for confirmation on this point. Raymond elaborates further, stating that it would be difficult to learn from the other 2 sword masters in their domain. Since being knighted, they have taken on managerial roles, making them unavailable for training. Takir listens, stunned by how deeply his brother and Raymond have considered the issue. His mind drifts to his brother's incredible potential. Takir recalls that in the previous timeline, Derek not only became a sword saint at the young age of 16, but also manifested light magic, a power rare across the entire country. Even in this new history, the signs of that same potential are already showing. He focuses on Derek, a startling realization dawning on him. It seems his brother is developing approximately 3 years faster than he did in the previous history. The name Derek echoes in his thoughts with new weight. The conversation returns to the present as Baron Solis addresses Raymond. Understanding the dissatisfaction with the current training partner, the Baron declares that he will have Raymond take care of finding a replacement. Before the matter is settled, Derek interjects, speaking to his father. He suggests that if it is a sword expert they are looking for, he might have someone in mind. His brother's confidence was palpable, but Takir's immediate, internal reaction was one of skepticism. How naive, he thought. But Derek's voice boomed with conviction, shattering Takir's assumption. He declared that Sir Weiss's swordsmanship had already reached the legendary rank of a sword demon, putting him an entire level ahead of Takir. The revelation struck Takir with the force of a physical blow, leaving him feeling utterly drained, as if he were smoldering in his bed from sheer overexertion while his concerned family looked on. Returning to the present moment, their father conceded that he understood the argument. He agreed to look into Weiss, but made it clear a final decision would wait until after his investigation. Derek, triumphant, gave Takir a reassuring wink. With so much having transpired, the meeting soon concluded. The Baron set his people to the task of investigating Weiss and his mercenary group, while Takir offered his thanks for the consideration. He reflected on how his brother's sudden support had saved him, wondering about the cause of Derek's newfound growth. The prospect of learning from Weiss, should the man accept them after the background check, was cause for a small, private celebration. The reason for Derek's change, however, was simple. He had seen his younger brother's immense talent and resolved to do his absolute best to ensure he wouldn't be left behind. Sensing this fierce, hidden rivalry, Takir apologized for having accidentally provoked him. Derek simply accepted, and Takir finally understood the source of his brother's recent, unusual behavior. Sometime later, at the mercenary group's temporary training grounds in the suburbs of Est, an 11-year-old Derek calls a halt to the day's training. An exhausted Takir sighs and thanks him for the instruction. Derek then turns and bows deeply to their new instructor, Weiss Schwarzfach, offering his profound thanks. Weiss stands impassively, observing the two brothers as Takir clutches his own training sword, weary but present. 3 months have passed since Takir and his older brother began their training under Weiss. Now 8 years old, Takir is utterly exhausted from the day's efforts, prompting a still energetic Derek to question where his younger brother's stamina has gone. Takir can only think that Derek himself looks sloppy. He reflects on the training. As expected, Weiss's methods were strict, earning him the title of a demon instructor. While Derek absorbed the lessons, Takir's own talents grew even faster, a fact that had astonished their father. Takir notes that Derek has already achieved the rank of sword expert and could now easily defeat ordinary soldiers, rapidly approaching the veteran level. Following his thoughts on Derek's progress, his brother proudly pats his own head, attributing all his success to having a good teacher. Their training regimen consists of 3 sessions a week, 1 at a temporary training ground and 2 in the courtyard of their mansion. In stark contrast, Takir despairs over his own performance. He is still just a trainee and feels pathetically useless with his sword, so much so that he believes he can't even hold his head high around other children his age. His internal monologue continues as he sits dejectedly under a tree, watching Derek and Weiss in the distance. He knows he should be studying under the same great teacher, but his lack of progress weighs heavily on him. He lets out a deep sigh, closing his eyes in a moment of quiet frustration. As he rests, his thoughts drift away from his personal struggles. He reassures himself that despite his swordsmanship woes, his larger plans for both the training and the settlement group are proceeding almost exactly as he envisioned. His mind turns to the details of the T-Gun settlement. He has already dispatched investigators, including some refugees he employed, to the area. The first order of business is to establish inns and shops, creating a rear base for hunters who venture into the demon realm. Though it will be on a smaller scale, he intends for it to function as a normal town. He privately wishes he could build an outer wall for better security. He continues his internal assessment, concluding that consulting with Raymond was the right decision. He realizes the true reason for the smooth progress is that Raymond has taken command. The advance party welcomed the mercenaries, and they are now working together to improve the town. A construction team is scheduled to arrive in 6 months to begin turning it into a proper settlement. His thoughts are interrupted as Derek calls his name. Startled, Takir looks up. Derek explains that Weiss has delegated the settlement missions to his vice captain and will now travel between the estate and the settlement to teach them. Furthermore, the Solis household and the mercenary group have formalized a 2-year contract, with options to renew annually thereafter. Takir can only manage a simple, questioning yes. He tries to wave his brother off, pleading for a moment's rest, but Derek is relentless. Having rested enough, Derek insists on a sparring match, brandishing his practiced sword with youthful energy. Derek presses on, teasing that if Takir keeps taking breaks, he'll be stuck as a trainee forever. Takir can only let out a cry of exasperation, knowing his brother thinks he's just swatting at a fly. His thoughts, however, drift beyond the training yard. With his swordsmanship tutelage now secured, he can finally turn his full attention to preparing countermeasures for the 5 great calamities. Later, while studying in his room, his concentration is broken by a servant at the door. The attendant announces that a delivery has arrived for Takir-sama from the workshop. A spark of intense excitement lights up his face. He realizes it's finally here, the item he had asked Carl Sand to create. He instructs the servant to bring it to his room, thinking to himself that with this, he can finally fire the 5th arrow. His mind flashes back to the reason for this project. He has been developing something since he was 5 years old to avert a future disaster. Next year, when he turns 9, the Solis Berni's army is fated to suffer significant casualties in a border battle, greatly weakening its power. This is the fourth of the 5 great calamities. The weapon he has engineered to prevent this catastrophe is a bow. It is a bow designed to fulfill 3 specific conditions. Its long range must allow the wielder to attack from far outside the enemy's reach. It must be powerful enough to pierce the armor of the Empire's iron cavalry. And it must not be reliant on the wielder's skill, so it can be used by anyone. He recalls the development process, starting when he asked for Carl's help at the workshop. He began by improving the materials used for bows in this world, first creating a composite bow from different kinds of wood, then improving it further by adding metal and monster materials. However, a test at the workshop revealed a critical flaw. As Geld, the workshop manager, drew the bow with immense effort, he commented that it wasn't something just anyone could use. The power and range came at the cost of requiring enormous physical strength, a fact that Takir observes with dawning concern. He recalled the weapon's fundamental design, a crossbow that merged the properties of a composite bow with those of a compound bow, a concept from 20th century America in his past life. By incorporating 4 pulleys, the design was intended to significantly reduce the burden of drawing the string while simultaneously increasing the projectile's initial velocity. Furthermore, mounting it on a stand would make it far easier to handle and aim with precision. With the workshop flooded with orders for water wheels, he had decided to take a prototype home to conduct his research personally. He continued his experiments alone, meticulously adjusting the string's positions, their attachments, and their ideal size and combination. He dredged up every memory he could of videos his former self, Nishida, had watched, determined to solve the problem. His resolve hardened, fueled by a single, unwavering purpose that flashed through his mind, the desire to protect his family and their territory. With a faint, satisfied smile, Takir reflects on the culmination of his efforts. He had invested everything his father gave him into this project. He gives credit to Carl, who handled the final refinements for the bow, its materials and components. He admits to himself that if it weren't for the dedication of those involved, he would have given up long ago. His thoughts conclude as he proudly presents a large wooden crate. The prototype, he announces, is finally finished and has just arrived fresh from the workshop. From within, he withdraws a masterfully crafted crossbow, holding it up for inspection. Behind it, several more identical weapons are lined up, ready for deployment. He had commissioned 2 distinct versions. The first is a low-cost model featuring a composite bow, but lacking pulleys. The second is a high-quality variant, made even more powerful by the inclusion of both a composite bow and a pulley system. He considers the weapon's history, acknowledging its pros and cons. In Europe's 100 Years' War, the longbow proved superior on the battlefield. In Japan, unique bows and early firearms dominated, causing the crossbow to fade into obscurity. This historical context is critical. The rival kingdom uses bows, but proficiency requires rigorous, continuous practice. Since the Solis Berni's forces are primarily composed of militia, such intensive training is simply not a viable option. But with crossbows, the solution is elegant in its simplicity. He brings the weapon to his shoulder, his eyes glinting with purpose. All a soldier must do is ensure the string is drawn and then pull the trigger. With this final piece in place, he knows all his preparations for the 5th arrow are complete. He also recalls Raymond's assurance that not a single word of the weapon's development would be leaked, a task the butler accepted with unwavering confidence. 2 days later, the scene shifts to the mercenary group's temporary training grounds. A voice rings out across the dusty field, calling out a cheerful, "Good morning, master." The one who greeted him is Weiss Schwarzfock. The mercenary leader stands ready, acknowledging the young noble's arrival with a simple, "Oh, young master." As Takir and his attendants approached the mercenary training grounds, Raymond inquired what the young master was carrying. Beside them, the maid and quietly thought that she should be the one carrying his belongings. He explained to Weiss that he had brought something for him to inspect, adding that he would also like to hear Raymond's opinion on it. With that, Takir presented the cloth-wrapped object. As he unwrapped it, Weiss looked on with a curious expression, his eyes falling upon the revealed weapon. The mercenary leader identified it as a crossbow, but noted its strange shape. Takir confirmed this, explaining that it was a custom design he conceived by combining several references, which his craftsman then brought to life. As Weiss inspected the weapon, Takir observed his doubtful expression. He correctly deduced that, as expected, Weiss already understood the advantages and disadvantages of a crossbow, despite the weapon not being widely used in the Care Kingdom. Pleased with this assessment, Takir eagerly asked for the mercenary's thoughts and then made a request for Weiss to fire a shot for him. Accepting the challenge, Weiss took the crossbow, his gaze sharp as he examined its unusual design before preparing to fire. He raised the weapon, drawing the string taut and taking aim at a distant target. Behind him, Raymond and watched with bated breath. Just as he aimed, Takir's hand moved subtly, his finger pressing down on a mechanism, producing a distinct click. The result was an instantaneous, powerful discharge that sent the bolt flying with shocking speed. The unexpected force startled Weiss, Raymond, and while Takir looked on with a calm, knowing smile. Stunned by the crossbow's unexpected power, Weiss lunges forward from his position, his eyes fixed on Takir. He grabs the young boy, his expression intense as he demands another weapon just like it. He quickly corrects himself, declaring that he wants to equip his entire mercenary group with them. In response to the mercenary's frantic demand, Takir puts on an exaggeratedly apologetic expression. He explains that, unfortunately, this is the only complete product available, and that he had intended to propose it to his father only after hearing Weiss's thoughts. Weiss, still processing the weapon's capability, admits his surprise at its power. He asserts that with such a weapon, they could pierce the armor of the Griffonia Empire's famed iron cavalry, considered the strongest in the land. He insists on purchasing one at any cost and urges Takir to speak with his father. As the discussion continued, Takir's older brother, Derek, could no longer contain his excitement. He pleads with Takir, calling it unfair that he can't try it and begging for a chance to shoot. A resigned Takir gives him permission to go ahead. Derek eagerly takes the crossbow and begins firing repeatedly, exclaiming that he wants to shoot just a bit more. He continues his barrage until the maid, and finally intervenes and gets him to stop. The following day, in the courtyard of the Baron Solis estate, Takir formally addresses his father, mother, and Raymond, thanking them for granting him their valuable time. He stands beside his brother Derek, a confident smile on his face. He acknowledges that his request might be sudden, but asks them to take a look at what he has brought. His gaze shifts to his brother. With a knowing look, he hands the crossbow to Derek, entrusting him with the demonstration by saying, "I'll leave it to you." In the courtyard of the Baron Solis' house, Takir presents a newly crafted crossbow. With a look of determination, he turns to Derek and declares that he is leaving the first shot to him. With a sharp click, the weapon fires. The bolt streaks forward with astonishing force, leaving Derek, Weiss, and staring in wide-eyed shock at its power. Takir, however, throws his fist in the air and celebrates with a triumphant shout of bullseye. His father, Baron Solis, can only stand by, utterly dumbfounded. The Baron recovers, his mind racing as he examines the strange and powerful weapon. He asks Takir if he got the idea from his books. Takir confirms that the idea for the bow's materials came from his studies. He adds that they had already consulted with Weiss, who tested the weapon and concluded it could likely defeat even the Griffonia Empire's famed iron cavalry. His father's reaction, however, is not one of praise. The Baron erupts, shouting that Takir is an idiot for not bringing such a critical matter directly to him first. Takir flinches, taken aback by the sudden scolding. As Raymond watches thoughtfully, Takir presses on despite the rebuke. He argues passionately that, more importantly, this weapon would enable even citizens lacking power and experience to help defend their territory. Weiss calls out to him, addressing him as Takir-sama. Raymond then interjects, posing a critical question. He asks if they are aware of why crossbows are not commonly used, explaining their critical weakness. The difficulty of reloading makes them lose to conventional bows in terms of firing rate. He turns to Takir, challenging him to respond. In response, Takir and Weiss stand together, a united front. Takir announces that it is time to begin preparations for the war in a year's time, and that the two of them have a proposal that addresses the very problem Raymond raised. Takir continues, urging that they should begin mass-producing the new weapon for the army as soon as possible. He reminds his father that their greatest threat is the Empire's iron cavalry, which would completely overwhelm them if they attacked in great numbers. The Baron listens, his expression grim as he contemplates the dire threat. He explains their situation. Their army numbers a mere 400, and their arrows cannot pierce the enemy's armor. This new weapon, however, can easily pierce steel. To secure a tactical advantage, Takir proposes they keep the weapon a secret for now. Hearing the full plan, the Baron quietly agrees. His proposal was met with a mix of awe and skepticism. Weiss conceded that mass-producing the weapon would be amazing, but he had reservations. In response, Takir elaborated, suggesting they also increase the number of users by training about 10% of the territory's population. He confidently stated that this was not an exaggeration, calculating that such a measure would provide them with around 800 archers. To achieve this, he proposed turning archery into a popular pastime. The archery range wouldn't be exclusively for soldiers. It would be open to the public, free of charge. To further encourage participation, various prizes, from money and jewelry to a fine sword, would be offered as incentives. His brother, Derek, chimed in with enthusiastic support, revealing that he had tried the crossbow the day before and found it incredibly fun. He expressed his belief that Takir's next proposal would alleviate everyone's remaining worries. Takir affirmed his brother's sentiment and launched into the next phase of his plan, titled the Sixth Arrow. He explained the first step, a simple competition where targets are assigned scores, and the person with the highest total score at the end wins the prize. He continued, outlining the subsequent steps. The second would be to host monthly and annual tournaments for people to showcase their skills. The third would be to offer prize money to winners, further encouraging participation. The fourth and final step involved the house acting as bookmakers, allowing the public to bet on competitors. This would not only generate excitement, but also help cover the costs of prizes and tournament upkeep. This comprehensive system, he explained, would transform the event into a grand festival where the citizens themselves are the main participants. With the tournament becoming livelier, more people would be inclined to join or bet. Having laid out the vision, he turned to his father and asked for his thoughts. Baron Solis declared it a wonderful idea, recognizing its potential to forge the populace into a valuable fighting force through entertainment and material gain. Bolstered by his father's approval, Takir clenched his fist with resolve, vowing that this tournament would eventually become the signature specialty of the Solis house. With that settled, he pivoted to address Raymond's earlier question regarding the crossbow's slow firing rate compared to a normal bow. He conceded the point, but argued that the method of use is far more important. He then revealed his solution: the three-row volley tactic, a strategy famously employed by Oda Nobunaga. He explained that by rotating rows of archers, one firing, one preparing, and one setting their arrow, they could maintain a continuous barrage. Though the total number of arrows fired might be fewer, he was certain this tactic would produce a rate of fire far greater than their current forces could achieve, and that it was the key to overcoming the Empire's charging iron cavalry. He continues his explanation, pointing out that even his brother Derek, a master swordsman but not a natural archer, was able to hit a distant target after only a single day of practice with a new crossbow. Building on this example, he turns to his father and asks them to imagine the incredible advantage they would have if all of the barony's soldiers could become just as proficient. He then adds, as an aside, that he has not yet informed Weiss of any of these plans. The mention of a name causes his father's expression to darken with concern. Despite their father's worry, both he and Derek exchange a look of shared confidence and determination. As the boys stand united, Raymond quietly observes that the young master has once again cleverly maneuvered the situation. Beside the Baron, Quirce frets aloud about the potential costs, a concern her father seems to pointedly ignore. His decision made, the Baron calls out to his attendant, Raymond, who immediately responds, awaiting his orders. He issues a string of commands. Raymond is to go to the workshop and request the mass production of the new crossbows, prepare for the construction of an archery range, and arm the populace with standard crossbows to begin forming a fighting force. The Baron stresses that all of this must be kept secret, with training to begin immediately. Raymond confirms he has understood. The Baron then turns to his sons, assigning their duties. Derek is tasked with researching the performance of each weapon on the battlefield, with a strict order to maintain secrecy. Takir is to create a report on the archery range's operation and the betting system he proposed. Both Derek and Takir eagerly accept their responsibilities. He concludes his address by declaring that all associated expenses will be covered by the territory's funds, removing any final obstacle. Just as the meeting seems to conclude, Takir speaks up again. He reminds his father that Weiss had expressed a desire to see the new crossbow, and with a smile, he announces that he has a proposal concerning that very matter. He continued laying out his proposal, suggesting that in exchange for the crossbows, Weiss's group will be subject to strict management and secrecy. They would use the weapons in live combat against monsters, providing feedback for improvements. As for payment, Takir proposed that instead of a direct purchase, the cost could simply be deducted from their existing contract fee. The Baron's eyes widened, recognizing the brilliance of the idea. Takir added that once Weiss's group became proficient, they could then be tasked with instructing the army, for which they would receive the first versions of the mass-produced crossbows. Weiss, who had been listening, smirked at Takir. He remarked that his young student had become quite the schemer, even taking advantage of his own teacher. Unfazed, Takir accepted it as a compliment, replying that he had been this way from the very beginning. Baron Solis mused on the long-standing dilemma of converting citizens into a fighting force. Going to war meant leaving the territory vulnerable to bandits and monsters. He then turned to Weiss, formally inviting him and everyone else to test the weapon. The Baron declared with renewed conviction that if they make their move now, they will surely be ready for the war and avenge their continuous defeats at the hands of the Iron Cavalry. Takir looked on, impressed. His father had immediately grasped the strategic advantage. If the people of the territory could be turned into a proper fighting force for defense, they could commit more of their main soldiers to the front lines with peace of mind. The excitement was palpable at the archery range, and cried out in delight, having hit her target, and eagerly told Raymond it was his turn next. Takir watched the scene unfold, a sense of amazement washing over him, as even his mother and the head butler took part. He smiled to himself, realizing the entertainment aspect of his plan was practically guaranteed. Should anyone express doubts later, he would only need to remind them of the enthusiasm on display here. This event, marked by the symbol of a black hawk, was the first step toward a not-so-distant future where they would gain a formidable reputation on the battlefield. From that point on, the weapon that had just been introduced to the world went under the name Estelbau. The scene shifts to a bustling workshop in the town of EST amidst the frantic shouts of craftsmen demanding more materials. A pair of dark boots steps onto the threshold. Weiss has arrived, calling out a cheerful hello. At the bustling workshop, the manager, Geld, spots the approaching party and greets them with a booming voice. He thanks the young master, Takir, for visiting, noting that the building has expanded and so has the number of workers. Takir, flanked by his attendants and Raymond, takes in the scene. Upon Geld's announcement, the craftsmen immediately cease their work. They turn in unison, stand at attention, and offer a loud, formal greeting, bowing deeply. Takir appears slightly taken aback by the formal display. He reassures Geld that such consideration isn't necessary, but the manager laughs, insisting he can't do otherwise. Takir then states his purpose. He has come to inquire about the Estelbows and to consult on a new project. At the mention of new stuff, Geld's expression sharpens with keen interest. Wasting no time, Takir urgently calls out for a craftsman named Carl, declaring the matter urgent, but something that could be handled in his spare time. Geld, however, insists that Takir's work should take priority. He earnestly explains that all the success and work the shop has received is due to the young master's ideas, just as it was with the water wheel. Behind Takir, and Raymond nod in silent agreement. Carl leads them away from the main floor and into a separate room. Takir expresses his satisfaction, noting that they can now hold their consultation in private. Carl then asks what new creation Takir has in mind this time. Inside the private room, Takir unrolls a large schematic before the two craftsmen. Here's the draft, he announces, presenting his latest design to Geld and Carl. The paper reveals a complex diagram of a mechanical device. Geld leans in, studying the intricate lines and asking for clarification on what he is seeing. Takir explains that it is a design for a rapid-fire crossbow. He assures them he is not in a rush for its completion and that they should continue to prioritize the production of the Estelbows. Geld nods, acknowledging the instruction. Pointing to the schematic, he details the mechanism. A magazine holds a bundle of arrows. By pulling a lever back and forth, an arrow is loaded and the string is drawn. Once the lever is pulled all the way back, the weapon fires automatically. He recalled the design of the Juga crossbow, a weapon said to be invented by a genius strategist from his former world. Whether it was historical fact or merely legend passed down through the ages was not important right now. His mind raced with the possibilities. He considered how a metal component could be used for the string-hooking mechanism, a cheer for his old world's technology echoing in his thoughts. While it was nowhere near as fast as a machine gun, it was certainly faster than a conventional bow, and there were no immediate drawbacks to investigating it. As Geld began to enthusiastically suggest modifications, like doubling a part to make a curve, Takir abruptly cut him off. Wait, he shouted, demanding their attention. He reminded them that the weapons they were already ordered to produce must take priority over everything else. He stressed that they could work on this new project another time, and pleaded with them to keep it a secret for now. Unfazed by the admonishment, Geld and Carl simply beamed, brandishing their tools with renewed vigor. With a confident declaration to just leave it to us, they accepted the clandestine project, leaving Takir momentarily speechless. Their enthusiasm gave him confidence. He reflected that at the current pace, the Estelbows would be completed in time. He recalled touring the production area with his brother, Derek, and seeing how the work was efficiently divided. This production was the bare minimum required to even consider facing the war at the border next year. Not long after, the first mass-produced versions of the Estelbow were ready. Takir was relieved to see them. He knew that Weiss had personally visited his father the day after the crossbow was demonstrated, securing the necessary amount for his mercenary group. This early completion allowed the mercenaries to not only begin using the Estelbows, but also to provide crucial feedback. At the Baron's request, they were already researching a 3-row volley tactic to maximize the weapon's effectiveness. All this preparation was to change a grim future. The war set to happen next year was a small-scale battle led by 2 marquisates. However, in the history Takir knew, this conflict led to the Solis barony losing a catastrophic 40% of its army. He considered the new advantages he had created. First, the Estelbows could be used against the enemy's main forces, the Iron Cavalry. Second, thanks to the bows, the number of archers had increased drastically. He also had the Black Hawk mercenary group, led by the invincible General Weiss. And fourth, the history of Baron Solis held a detailed record of how the Care Kingdom's military had collapsed. He continued to worry, even with his preparations underway. While his new bows provided one advantage, he had reservations about the Gorman Viscounty, who didn't seem like reliable allies. This lingering anxiety fueled his desire for another trump card, a way to secure their victory. The feeling that something was amiss gnawed at him. While sitting outside with his brother, Derek asked what was troubling him. Takir decided to broach the subject of his magic, which Derek confirmed was quite rare in the Care Kingdom. Takir acknowledged this, a thoughtful expression on his face. Derek casually encouraged him to speak his mind. Taken aback by the simple permission, Takir's demeanor shifted. He clasped his hands together, pleading for his brother to listen to his complaints for a moment. He launched into a passionate rant, his face twisted with frustration. He questioned aloud if it was true that he was so worried, exclaiming that if the situation weren't so dire, he wouldn't be this distraught. In the middle of his outburst, a realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. A new plan began to form. This can work, he thought. He abruptly cut himself off, telling a confused Derek that they needed to see their father immediately. Derek sighed, resigned to the fact that he would probably be scolded again. His eyes gleamed with sharp confidence. He explained that his idea was a first-time killer, a tactic so unexpected it would be nearly impossible for the enemy to counter on their first encounter. With this, he declared, they would be able to achieve victory against the Empire's formidable Iron Cavalry. As Takir finalized his new secret weapon, the official announcement was made. the Solis barony would join the war. One day, during the sweltering summer heat, a messenger from Marquis Hasberg arrived in Estel. Derek and received the urgent news at the top of the stairs, while young Takir observed from below. The message was a call to arms. There were signs of an impending invasion by the Griffonia Empire. The order was to gather troops immediately, assemble at the southern gate fort, and annihilate the enemy on the southern gate plains. Takir listened with a grave expression. Derek noted that the force being mustered was 200 men more than a baron would typically command. While not the 600 a higher-ranking viscount might have, it was deemed sufficient to preserve their honor. Their destination was the southern gate plains, a battlefield bordering the demon realm. He recalled the moment they saw the troops off. Through the main gate of the fortress, he and the remaining members of the family watched as the soldiers marched out toward the plains. As the memory faded and looked down at her son, Takir, whose quiet sigh did not escape her notice. Her expression was filled with a mother's concern. He was taking a break from his self-imposed training, a wooden sword resting beside him. He mused internally that it must be about time for his father and the others to be arriving at the battlefield. His thoughts drifted back to when he was 9 years old. He had expressed a strong desire to join the army, but his family had flatly rejected his plea. He remembered their words clearly, and Derek had admonished him, stating that the battlefield was not a child's playground and was far from the simple place he imagined it to be. Takir knew he wasn't being naive. It was precisely because he understood the true harshness of fighting that he had pushed himself to become stronger. He couldn't stop thinking about it. If events followed the original history, the Solis barony's army would lose 40% of its strength. But this time, he vowed, will be different. He had armed them with things they never had before. He had made sure to discuss the Iron Cavalry's tactics with Weiss San, along with any possible counters. With the strategies of Weiss San, the genius of the battlefield, the invincible general, and their elite troops, they should be able to overcome any disadvantage. He reflects on the changes made to the Solis barony's army structure. The formal archer position has been eliminated. Instead, every soldier, including the cavalry, has been equipped with an Estel bow, a weapon powerful enough to pierce the armor of the infamous Iron Cavalry, yet simple enough for even conscripts to use effectively. This, combined with the increase in cavalry numbers, a move his father made 2 years prior during a surge in grain prices, represents a significant improvement over their forces from the previous history. Having done everything he could with his knowledge, he now finds himself a mere child, unable to do anything but wait for news. The understanding of his powerlessness vexes him. He clasps his hands together, praying fervently that they will all get through this fourth calamity safely. His mother, and watches him with a gentle but concerned expression as he continues his silent, desperate plea for them to overcome this trial. Her gaze drifts to the window, following a hawk as it soars into the sky, the weight of her son's prayer hanging in the air. Meanwhile, far away near the border on the southern gate plains, the scene is set for battle. Derek, clad in armor and mounted on his horse, represents the far right wing of the Care Kingdom's forces, the Solis-Cornell Barony Alliance. A soldier calls out to him. He meets with Weiss Schwarzfach, who reports that their work is done. The encampment has been created, and with the help of earth mages lent by Baron Cornell, the trenches have been dug and traps have been set. Derek commends him for the good work. As they survey the preparations, Derek asks Weiss to confirm a rumor that the Empire's invasion is a result of their internal succession problems. Weiss affirms this, explaining that it is an act of desperation by the First Prince's faction. Since the prince has no military achievements, he is not even present. Only Marquis Gott leads the charge. Derek acknowledges the truth in Weiss's words, remarking that while it may be the Empire's problem, it has become a major source of trouble for them. With that, he cuts to the heart of the matter, asking the captain for his assessment of their odds. Weiss turns to him with a serious expression. He begins his assessment by stating the numbers. The enemy has roughly 7,000 soldiers, the same as their own forces. He continues, explaining that while the fundamental strategy, preparing for an offensive using a crane wing formation to intercept the enemy, is not wrong, he believes it is nothing other than dangerous. A map of the battlefield illustrates the Griffonia Empire's plan. Marquis Gott's forces, with the 2,000-strong Iron Cavalry at their core, are poised to strike the center of the Care Kingdom's formation. He begins his explanation by cautioning that the enemy will not necessarily act according to their expectations. For one, their primary target might not be the center of their formation, which is held by the forces of Marquis Hasberg. He continues, pointing out that the larger their crane wing formation becomes, the less effective it will be. Because their allies have spread themselves thinner than they should to occupy advantageous defensive positions on inclines, they have created large, vulnerable gaps between the wings. With grim certainty, he concludes that the enemy's plan is to exploit this weakness, taking their forces out one by one, beginning with either the left or the right wing. Weiss visualizes the enemy's likely maneuver. After defeating a wing, the enemy could break through completely, cutting off all avenues of retreat and surrounding the isolated forces. From there, they could use the opening to attack Marquis Hasberg's central army from the sides or the rear. Derek listens intently, the gravity of the situation sinking in. He murmurs that if such a scenario were to happen, it would spell the end for their entire army. Weiss confirms this, identifying the fatal flaw in their strategy. Because both armies have an equal number of soldiers, their own army being spread so thin in a large encirclement formation makes it easier for the enemy to break through. Critically, it also makes it difficult for their allied units to support each other. The conversation then narrows to their immediate flank, the right wing, which is composed of Viscount Gorman's army and Viscount Hierony's army. Derek lets out a long sigh, connecting the strategic problem to a political one. He recalls the recent incidents with the turnips and the refugees, admitting that all the allied factions have viewed each other with suspicion from the very beginning. Weiss grimaces, acknowledging how troublesome it is to be on guard against one's own allies. He looks at the map again, realizing that if the enemy focuses on the right wing, their Solis Cornell forces will be isolated from the rest of the army, becoming complete fodder. The true, chilling possibility then dawns on him. If the two Viscounts were to decide to take revenge on them during this battle, they would only need to draw their defensive line back a little. The Solis Cornell forces would be completely cornered and left for dead. He stood beside Derek, his expression grim. He agreed that the situation was dangerous, adding that it was likely the enemy had already anticipated this very vulnerability. The enemy's main force, Marquis Gott's Iron Cavalry, was renowned for its strength. A direct, frontal assault would be suicidal. They wouldn't stand a chance. In response to this grim reality, Derek offered a slight, confident smile. He countered that this was only true if they were foolish enough to charge them from the front. He continued, explaining that the enemy's overwhelming strength created an opening they could use, a strategy that could completely turn the tide of the battle. As Takir listened, Weiss began to detail their own assets. He mentioned Baron Cornell's troops, who were skilled with constructs. Furthermore, all 400 of their soldiers were equipped with Estel bows, and half of those were also cavalry. And, as their banners fluttered against the sky, he hinted at something more. Derek picked up the thread, revealing that they had also prepared a hidden ace, a secret strategy. Weiss elaborated on a plan, one that even their allies wouldn't expect. He explained that the enemy's left wing was led by the famously brave Viscount Silius. If their forces could withstand his charge and then have their own left wing flank him, their odds would be quite good. His eyes narrowed with sharp intensity. If the maneuver was successful, he declared, it would completely turn the tides of the war. Derek let out a smug humph, satisfied with their cleverness. Weiss, however, simply looked back at him with a silent, questioning gaze. His expression remained neutral as Derek spoke, confirming that appointing him as an advisor seemed to be the correct decision. Derek mentioned that the recommendation came from the Baron's own sons, noting that Takir, in particular, had been quite insistent. Weiss's only reaction was a slight, sharp intake of breath, his mind already focused on the coming conflict. Derek, however, continued speaking as he turned away, his cape swirling behind him. He added with a confident smirk that, regardless of the recommendation, he had planned to utilize Weiss's talents from the very beginning. In response, Weiss simply stated that it was an honor, his face betraying no emotion. His gaze, however, was fixed on the horizon, across the vast plains where the enemy would soon appear. He knew it should be about time for them to make their move. And, just as he anticipated, the moment arrived. Derek, now clad in full armor and holding their banner high, roared the command to the assembled soldiers. All troops, prepare for battle. The conflict that would one day be known as the Southern Gate Annihilation War had now begun. At the Griffonia Empire headquarters, Marquis Gott observes the opposing army. He notes with a smirk that the Care Kingdom forces have taken the exact formation he anticipated. He scoffs, believing they fail to grasp that he intentionally let them take the defensible high ground. He elaborates to a nearby knight that their enemy is predictable, always quick to protect themselves by sticking to high ground for better defense, thinking of nothing else. He lets out a dismissive sound, confident in his assessment. With his trap set, the Marquis outlines the plan. Their forces will hold back the enemy's center and right wing, while their own left wing executes a complete flanking maneuver on the enemy's right. A warhorse stomps its hoof, eager for the battle to begin. He then bellows the order to charge, instructing the Iron Cavalry to wait in the rear for an opening before joining the front lines to completely crush the enemy's right flank. The cavalry surges forward in a thunderous advance. The battlefield erupts into chaos as the forces of the Cornell barony clash violently with Viscount Hierony's army. The air fills with the clang of steel and the cries of combat. Amidst the fray, a commander steps forward, his voice calm as he confirms that events are unfolding as expected. He orders his troops to prepare for a long-range volley. The commander is revealed to be Weiss Schwarzfock. He gives a precise command. Everyone is to hold their fire until the order is given. He clarifies that each shooter's position will be determined by a number they have received, stressing the need for careful coordination. From the lines of the Solis-Cornell Barony Alliance, soldiers observe the enemy's movements. They realize their right wing's weakness has been identified. The enemy, they deduce, is planning to overwhelm their right flank with superior numbers while using archers to keep their center and left wings pinned down, aiming to take them out one by one. A battle map confirms their analysis. The enemy's strategy is clear. After the front lines of the two Viscounts collapse, the Iron Cavalry will be sent in to finish off the Alliance's main force by attacking from the right. The assessment is grim. It is all proceeding exactly as they had feared. Weiss's expression is sharp as he concludes his thoughts. On the battlefield, numbers are power. He calculates that over 2,000 enemies are targeting their right wing, an overwhelming force even for the combined armies of Viscounts Gorman and Hyrimi. To make matters worse, he knows the morale of those allied armies is low. He stands beside Takir, overlooking the vast battlefield. Observing the chaos, he remarks that the enemy's collapse is only a matter of time. Takir quietly affirms his assessment. Down on the front lines, within Viscount Hyrimi's army, the soldiers are at their breaking point. They cry out about the overwhelming number of foes, desperately questioning why the order to retreat has not yet been given. Their commander, Viscount Hyrimi, can only grit his teeth in frustration from atop his horse as his formation crumbles around him. Meanwhile, at the Griffonia Empire's main headquarters, a report arrives. An officer informs his commander that one of the enemy lines has collapsed with surprising ease. The commander, Marquis Gott, receives the news, noting that the other allied force seems to be holding on stubbornly. An officer beside him scoffs, dismissing them as insignificant since they couldn't even reduce half of the Empire's forces. With a ferocious grin, Marquis Gott bellows for his troops to surround and crush the stubborn bastards. On that very line, Viscount Gorman curses the spineless wimp, Hyrimi, whose retreat has left Gorman's army exposed. Viscount Gorman realizes that at this rate, his 2,000 soldiers will be overwhelmed. Making a swift decision, he orders his men to preserve their line as they conduct a slow, fighting withdrawal. The news travels quickly back to the Solis Cornell command post. An officer reports that Viscount Hyrimi's line has completely collapsed and that Viscount Gorman is also retreating. Takir takes in the dire report in silence. His quiet contemplation is broken by Weiss, who turns to him with a sharp, ready gaze. He states that it is time for them to begin. Takir simply agrees. He then turns his back to the observer and calmly instructs his subordinate to give the signal. The moment for their countermaneuver has arrived. His mind, however, was not on the signal or the collapsing battle lines. It drifted to a quieter, earlier time, standing beside Crisia as she gazed pensively through a window. He stood at her side, his own expression a mask of solemn resolve, the weight of the future already on his young shoulders. That moment, and the choices that followed, marked the point where history truly began. It was a new chapter forged by the ambitions of many. The calculating mercenary Weiss, the powerful Marquis Gott, and Takir himself. From the sidelines, allies like the Chef Miguel watched with fierce anticipation, declaring that it was at long last about time. At the Griffonia Empire's headquarters, Marquis Gott laughs, his men crediting his brilliance for their advantage. The Marquis scoffs at his enemy's pathetic display of composure, deciding it is time to deliver their last rites. He clenches his armored fist, invoking the name of his feared Iron Cavalry. Elsewhere on the field, an opposing commander lays out his own strategy. He orders his troops to completely destroy the enemy's right wing, break through from the rear, and bring him the Marquis' head. A subordinate, Weiss, points to the isolated army on the far right, identifying it as the first target. With his face twisted in a furious roar, the commander bellows the order to his men. Destroy them all. The sudden appearance of the Iron Cavalry sends a shockwave across the battlefield. Takir, standing amidst the unfolding chaos, recognizes them with alarm. He understands that the situation has shifted in an instant, wondering how it's possible when the Marquis' main force has not moved. He turns urgently to the cloaked figure beside him, Darren, demanding to know his orders in light of this new threat. Darren remains silent, his profile calm and steady as he observes the battle. Below him, his soldiers wait with tense anticipation for his command. In that moment of waiting, Takir reflects that his father must have stood in this very position many times before. Taking initiative, he issues commands to the nearby archers. Confirm arrows are loaded, prepare for a volley, and take cover. He gives one final, crucial instruction. They must not fire until they hear the signal. The archers affirm their orders with a resounding yes. Standing on the ridge beside Darren, Takir clenches his fist. It is time for the signal. His eyes scan the battlefield, but then he freezes. He spots a familiar figure, Derek. Shock grips Takir as he questions why his brother is here, a knot of fear tightening in his stomach at the immense danger. Despite the shock, his voice carries the final part of his command to the archers, his tactical mind still at work. At my signal, please aim for the front of the enemy lines. He stands frozen on the battlefield, the eyes of his soldiers fixed upon him. His heartbeat thunders in his ears, yet the world around him feels unervingly silent. The pressure brings a memory to the surface. His brother Derek, standing beside him, offering words of encouragement. Derek tells him to calm down, reminding him that they are destined for victory. His brother then clenches a gloved fist, admitting that, in truth, he is also terrified. But despite the fear, Derek's face breaks into a confident, reassuring smile. That memory solidifies his resolve in the present. With his arm raised to signal the archers, Takir's eyes burn with focus. He has made his decision. The memory of his brother's voice rings in his ears, urging him to target the second group to the right and to act now. Takir screams his affirmation, deciding in that moment that he is going to believe. With that renewed conviction, he puts his faith not only in himself, but in his little brother. The narrative shifts. A few months before the war started, the scene shifts to that earlier time, where Takir explains the limitations of his power. He laments that his light isn't able to hurt anyone. At most, it can only blind them for a bit. He continues to vent his frustrations to Derek, calling his light magic a dud of a skill that won't even cause wounds. As a swordsman, he questions what he's supposed to do with such cheap tricks, wishing for fire or lightning instead. Derek listens, understanding his brother's feelings. He sulked, lamenting to his brother Derek that simply throwing light around was the only thing he could do. Intrigued, Derek asked for a demonstration. Takir reluctantly agreed and conjured a bright orb of light in his outstretched palm. The resulting flash startled a nearby maid, but left Derek utterly amazed. He stared at the lingering glow, speechless. Takir, however, remained unimpressed, pointing out that it just produces a bit of light. Derek turned to his younger brother, his face alight with excitement, exclaiming that he possessed an amazing magic skill. Takir was left completely bewildered by this reaction. Immediately after, Takir dragged Derek off to make a report to their father. The very next day, at the training grounds on the outskirts of Est, Derek stood contemplating. He understood. Takir found his brother, now clad in training gear, and eagerly asked him to use the light magic, wanting to see it himself. Derek readily agreed. He gave Takir a confident wink, promising to turn the simple light into something far more interesting. Takir watched, his expression filled with excited anticipation, as Derek seemed to prepare. As they stood near the field, Takir posed a tactical question, asking what Derek thought would happen if his light were aimed at galloping horses. The implication dawned on Derek. His expression sharpened as he realized Takir was suggesting a battlefield application. He understood what his younger brother meant. Takir confirmed the thought with the certainty of a seasoned strategist. If a cavalry unit galloping at full speed were to suddenly lose their vision, the resulting damage would be unimaginable. Exactly. Derek fully grasped it then. His light magic was destined to become a powerful weapon on the battlefield, just as Takir had said. Understanding his brother's strategic insight, Derek began to train, determined to throw the light even further and with more precision. His training culminates in this moment, as he unleashes a blinding flash of light on the battlefield. The strategic significance of his action becomes clear. Mages are a rare and valuable resource, with neither the kingdom nor the empire possessing many. Compounding this scarcity, most are practitioners of bloodline magic, tying them to noble houses. These high-status individuals, family heads, and their kin do not typically risk their lives on the front lines, save for those from remote regions. Consequently, the sight of a mage actively engaged in combat at the vanguard is an exceptionally rare event. Derek looks at his younger brother, Takir, with a concerned expression. He understands that Takir's desire to join the military is even stronger because of his rare light magic. A voice cuts through the air, declaring with finality that Takir will not be allowed to join the military. The refusal comes from his parents, Baron Solis and Anne. Takir, shocked by their unified opposition, spreads his arms and demands to know their reasoning. His father looks at him sternly, acknowledging that the day he can enter the battlefield will eventually come. However, the Baron states firmly that it is still far too early for him right now. Takir protests, arguing that he has already explained how useful Derek's light magic would be against the Empire's iron cavalry. His father cuts him off, first acknowledging Derek's earnest work before sharply telling Takir to be quiet. As Takir stands stunned by the rebuke, his mother kneels before him. With a pleading expression, she explains that she does not wish for him to go to such a dangerous place, reminding him that he is still only 12 years old. He looks down at his distraught mother, his own face a mask of shock and confusion as he can only utter her name. Before he can say more, Baron Solis addresses the young girl, Quirce, telling her that is enough. He warns that accommodating a child's obstinacy will only lead to trouble, as Derek and Takir watch the tense exchange. In response to the Baron's sharp words, Quirce's face contorts with emotion. She shouts defiantly, "You're wrong." Her outburst stuns everyone in the room. Her passionate defense stems from a past feeling. Quirce's mind flashes back, revealing that at first, she was simply envious of Takir. Her thoughts spiraled back to the source of her envy. She was older than Takir, yet it was always him who was showered with praise. The injustice of it all felt overwhelming. But that feeling began to change. She recalled watching him, seeing how hard he pushed himself, how relentlessly he trained. Her initial envy started to shift into something else. These observations led her to question her own feelings. She began to wonder why she had been so envious of him and what goal Takir was working so desperately to achieve. The memory of this long-held internal conflict brings fresh tears to her eyes in the present. She clutches the doorframe, overwhelmed by a frustration that feels as if it will never end. Looking directly at Takir, she raises her voice to be heard over the tension in the room, insisting that her actions are not born of simple obstinance or a desire to put on a show. Her voice cracks with emotion as she struggles to articulate the depth of her feelings, stammering that she also wants something. With a final, desperate cry, she declares her own desire to protect everyone. As the words leave her lips, a blinding flash of pure white light erupts from her body. The sudden radiance engulfs the courtyard. Takir's family and the nearby soldiers are caught completely by surprise, crying out in pain and confusion as they shield their eyes from the intense glare. Chaos erupts in the ranks. The soldiers' horses rear up in panic, neighing wildly. Their riders struggle to maintain control, shouting for the animals to calm down as their formation breaks. Still reeling from the flash, one of the armored soldiers looks back toward the source, his voice filled with disbelief. He curses, demanding to know what that light was. In the immediate aftermath of the blinding flash, the battlefield descends into chaos. Horses shriek in terror as the charging cavalry, their vision stolen, plummet into unseen pitfalls. An armored soldier cries out as his mount collapses into a deep trench he never saw. Observing the disaster from a distance, Viscount Hierimi notes with cold logic that while small bumps and shallow trenches are easily avoided, they become lethal obstacles when one cannot see. His strategy proves devastatingly effective, yet Takir stands frozen, his eyes wide with shock amidst the cheers of his own men. They celebrate wildly, believing Derek has saved them, oblivious to the true architect of their salvation. Meanwhile, within the ranks of Marquis Habsburg's army, a messenger gallops to his commander. He breathlessly reports that the Iron Cavalry is in disarray, and that Baron Solis clearly had a countermeasure prepared. The Marquis listens to the report, not with anger, but with a flicker of intrigued surprise. A thoughtful sound escapes his lips as he processes the unexpected turn of events. From his own vantage point, Viscount Hierimi continues to watch the unfolding battle. He remains silent, his expression a mask of grim contemplation. The full report finally reaches Marquis Habsburg. A third of the Iron Cavalry, their strongest force, has been incapacitated. Enraged, the Marquis grabs the reporting soldier, refusing to believe it and roaring that he is being lied to. In stark contrast to the enemy's fury, Derek looks upon Takir with profound admiration. He tells the young master that he has done very well. He steps closer, addressing Takir as master, but his words falter, unable to fully articulate his awe at the plan's success. Takir, now composed and standing firm, offers a simple but weighty acknowledgement in return. Great work. He stands beside Derek, who confidently tells him to leave the rest of them. Looking up at his older brother, Takir internally assesses the remaining enemy forces. Around 2/3 are still active. He resolves that they must quickly play their next hand and mentally prepares the order for long-range suppressive fire. As Takir strategizes, Derek's expression hardens with determination. He clenches his gloved fists, ready for the fight ahead. This young man, the eldest son of the Solis family, is fated to one day become a sword saint, earning the title Swordsman of Light. His destiny, however, would have to wait. The immediate battle, Takir's first, had begun with a great flash of light that humiliated the Empire's forces, injuring many before they could even mount a proper defense. As a hawk soars above the battlefield, a single feather drifts down, only to be crushed by an armored hand. Looking up, Takir feels a sense of accomplishment, thinking to himself that he has done all he can, just as his name is called out. In the regular meeting room of the Baron Solis house, Takir stands at the head of a long table. With a pointer in hand, he formally announces the start of the first regular meeting of the newly formed Flood Prevention Committee. He internally recalls the events that led to this moment. It was not long after his father and brother left for war. He had refused to simply sit idle and, before they departed, consulted with his parents to successfully establish this very committee. Tugging on his mother's sleeve, he had explained his findings from old documents. Heavy rains and floods often occurred years after drought. Given the recent tandem of droughts and abundant harvests, his parents had taken the information seriously. Back in the present, and gently addresses her 7-year-old daughter, Quirce, who clutches a teddy bear. She reminds the girl of her promise to sit beside her and play quietly during the meeting. Takir explains to the others why his little sister is present. Quirce had absolutely refused to be away from their mother. He privately muses that her real reason is that he, her older brother, is also involved. Slightly annoyed, Quirce declares she'll go play with the other girl, Sarah. Sarah, the daughter of a branch family from the Cornell barony, is startled by the sudden attention and calls out Quirce's name in surprise. Takir sighs internally, realizing his sister doesn't grasp the situation. Quirce, meanwhile, thinks that since Sarah is just an observer, she should be free to play with her, and clarifies Sarah's role. She explains that Sarah, though from a branch family, is an earth magic user, the only other one in their territory, and has been a great help. Furthermore, she is Anne's attendant, sent by Baron Cornell as a sign of goodwill. Quirce happily accepts this, securing a promise to play with Sarah after the meeting. Using a chart, Takir elaborates on the family connection. The head of the Cornell barony is his mother's younger brother, fostering a good relationship between their houses. Sarah was sent to be Anne's assistant, making it easier for his mother to move about. With the introduction settled, Takir steers the meeting back to its purpose, announcing he will read the results of the preliminary investigation. Raymond then reports that, per Takir's request, they interviewed elders in the surrounding villages. He notes that while old documents showed nothing, their interviews have yielded results. He begins the report by explaining the region's cyclical history, stating that every 50 to 100 years, Mars experiences heavy rains and severe flooding, powerful enough to cause embankments to fail. Quirce adds that only a legend from their predecessors remains, a warning to be wary of water following a severe drought. She notes that because there have been no major floods in the last 2 decades, the populace has largely forgotten this fact. Raymond listens, understanding that if the embankments fail, the resulting muddy waters will cause catastrophic damage. He then turns to his attendant, asking if Raymond agrees that they should not ignore such a legend. Raymond confirms his agreement. Internally, Takir feels a sense of relief, acknowledging that the legend provides a great assist. He privately admits that his information actually comes from an old history book, meaning he is only telling a partial truth. The discussion turns to a map, which shows the large Orgu River flowing west of the Estel territory. The town of Mars is situated near this river, which serves as the life source for the bountiful grain fields on both of its banks. Takir reflects that Mars isn't a town with a deep history. It only recently began to prosper as a grain hub due to his parents' large-scale farmland development 10 years prior. This, he surmises, is why the current governors are unaware of the long-term flood cycle. The investigation also uncovered reports of smaller rivers overflowing throughout Estel each year. Since the damage is typically minor, these incidents are not reported to the governing bodies. Takir resolves to be more vigilant and monitor the surrounding villages closely. Raymond concludes that if the legend proves true, a centennial flood would be a catastrophe far eclipsing the previous drought. After being thanked for his work, Quirce speaks up, announcing she has already talked to her brother about securing Earth mages. She believes that after the war, they can acquire the mages needed to construct proper embankments. As Sarah nods in agreement, Quirce states with firm resolve that they must prevent such a disaster from happening at all costs. While she clutches a small teddy bear, her expression one of fierce determination, Takir's internal thoughts reveal a chilling certainty. He knows everything about the flood that is destined to happen next year. His mind projects a grim vision of the future he knows is coming. Next summer, after long, heavy rainfall, the Orgu River will overflow. In a single night, muddy waters will engulf the town of Mars and its surrounding villages, claiming many lives and rendering the grain fields completely unrecoverable. This disaster would completely destroy the embankments. He recalls the history of his past life. After a drought rendered most farmland unusable, the low-lying town of Mars became the territory's lifeline, producing a full third of its crop yield. When that lifeline was washed away by the flood, it was a fatal blow to the entire region. He considers, however, that the situation is now different. The new water wheels have allowed other parts of the territory to develop, reducing the reliance on Mars's farms, which now only account for a fifth of the yield. But what is now vital are the mills that run on those water wheels. If the town is flooded, the economic damage will be even more catastrophic than in his previous history. As he mulls over this grim calculus, the meeting continues. Quirce turns to Raymond, asking for an update on countermeasures against the minor flooding that has recently occurred around Mars. Raymond reports that they have already checked the waterways, strengthened the water gates, and that preparations for embankment construction are proceeding smoothly. The butler elaborates, explaining they've also begun inspections in other areas and are accumulating soil to reinforce the ground. Since the mills cannot be moved, they have decided to relocate the storage hub to higher ground. Quirce notes the constraints. Construction must wait for the Army's return, and they are still trying to balance the budget with project safety. Listening to the thorough report, Takir is amazed, thinking to himself that Raymond's competence is a greater cheat than his own reincarnation. His mind racing with these new details, Takir then poses a question he has always been curious about. He asks Raymond what effect a flood would have on the neighboring Gorman Viscounty. Raymond confirms the boy's unspoken thought with a wry smile. It seems they won't have to face the unlikable steward's complaints again. Takir smirks, imagining Viscount Gorman fuming that their new embankment is the reason floodwaters have entered his territory. But as he savors the thought, another detail surfaces. He realizes that Gorman's territory had also installed water wheels. More importantly, it appears they constructed a new waterway sourced directly from the very same river basin. The implication of this new information strikes him with physical force. He jolts upright in his chair with a cry of shock, his previous confidence shattered by this unforeseen complication. His composure shatters. Reverting to the accent of his past life, he fumes about others complaining about his methods only to copy them later, angrily declaring he wants to earn royalty fees for his designs. His outburst fades as Raymond reports that while Gorman's territory did copy their water wheels, the copies are inefficient and break down often. Takir agrees, admitting to himself that his own success was built on the knowledge of craftsmen and concept from light novels. A thought strikes him, and he calls out to Raymond. Before his subordinate can answer, Takir's mind races. He realizes it's very possible that Gorman's people deliberately removed embankments to create their new waterways. The implication is dire. A flood could now occur upstream, within the Gorman Viscounty itself. He clutches his head, trying to dismiss the thought by reasoning that it would be their own fault. But the sheer scale of the potential catastrophe leaves him reeling in disbelief. His frantic thoughts are interrupted by Quirce. He starts to remind her of her promise to be quiet, but she looks up from her teddy bear and poses a devastatingly simple question. If the water doesn't flow toward either of their lands, where will it go? Her question renders him speechless. His eyes widen as the realization crashes down upon him. He was so focused on protecting Mars that he never stopped to consider where the diverted floodwaters would ultimately end up. The horrifying answer fills his mind. The water would surge downstream, flooding countless villages, then the Hyarimi Viscounty, and finally it would reach Estel. The thought that Estel itself could sink is a possibility he cannot bear. Panic sets in. He realizes the scale is too large to calculate the effects, and time is running out. He admits he may have been subconsciously avoiding this outcome. Raymond, however, misinterprets his distress as foresight, impressed that Takir had considered such a complex scenario. Just as his panic peaks, Raymond calmly interjects, revealing that they are already investigating the matter and creating a list of areas that will require countermeasures. Takir is stunned into silence, while Quirce, praised by Raymond, beams with pride. Quirce sighs in relief, thinking it was a close call and that they will need more Earth mages. She recalls Takir's panicked face, as he himself mentally thanks her for the crucial follow-up that saved them from a massive oversight. She speaks up, hesitantly addressing Raymond about Viscount Gorman and Viscount Hyarimi. As Raymond rises abruptly from his chair, Sarah acknowledges Quirce's request, stating she will have her little brother informed. He stands and explains that since their information is based on old documents, its credibility is uncertain. However, he confirms they will still reinforce the embankments and waterways as a precaution and will inform the other lords. Internally, Takir expresses his gratitude. With a plan of action decided, Raymond formally concludes the first regular meeting. As the meeting adjourns, Takir reflects on the limited time until summer. It is decided that Darren and Derek will join the next meeting to discuss more specific countermeasures. The great effort to prevent the flood from engulfing the Estel territory has officially begun. A few days later, Takir stares intently at a map of the Estel territory, renewing his vow to complete the project by next summer. His thoughts are interrupted by a voice calling his name. He turns to see a messenger rushing in, who urgently reports that a rider has just arrived from the fort with a message from his father. Propelled by the news, Takir sprints through the estate, shouting that he is on his way, with Quirce and a maid hurrying to keep pace behind him. They arrive at the entrance hall to find his mother, and, already there, the messenger stands before them, announcing he bears a report from the battlefield. The messenger continues, his voice clear and steady, reporting that Marquis Hasburg's army at the Southern Gate Fort has engaged the forces of the Griffonia Empire's Marquis Got. Takir's expression becomes taut with focus. He concludes with triumphant news. Their army has won a great victory. The enemy's iron cavalry was completely annihilated by Baron Solis's army, and Derek made great contributions in his first battle. Crucially, the barony's forces suffered no casualties, only a number of wounded. Quirce covers her mouth, overcome with relief. Seeing and overcome with emotion, Quirce runs towards her, calling out. Takir, too, expresses his concern. But-N's tears are not of sorrow. With a trembling hand to her lips, she whispers in profound relief that Derek is safe. The news of their impending return brings a wave of joy. Quirce asks if her father and brother are truly coming home, while she and Sarah express their gratitude. Takir, however, allows himself a small, private smile, musing that his father will surely sulk upon learning that his wife's tears were reserved solely for Derek. Her own relief shining through her tears, and confirms it for them with a gentle, watery smile. She affirms that yes, they're coming home. Quirce, caught up in the excitement, wonders aloud if they will bring back souvenirs. Takir playfully teases her, suggesting that, in fact, they might not have anything for them. This sentiment of relief and celebration was not confined to the manor. Once the news reached the town of Est, the people cheered. Throughout the entire territory, food and alcohol were distributed, and every town and village celebrated, soothing the anxious hearts of the soldiers' families and lovers. Watching the joy unfold, Takir and Quirce share a contented smile. With this widespread celebration and the safe return of the soldiers, it was clear, of the 5 initial calamities he had foreseen, the 4th, war damage, was now resolved, and pulls both Takir and Quirce into a warm, encompassing hug, a picture of familial bliss as Raymond and the household staff look on. The threat of war damage has been successfully prevented. A month after the great victory at the Southern Gate Plains, 2 figures in armor arrive at a grand entrance. The younger of the two, Takir, beams with excitement and announces his return, proudly declaring himself Baronet Solis. Before his companion, Derek, can react, their mother, and rushes towards them with her long hair flowing behind her. She sweeps Takir into a fierce hug, catching him completely by surprise as Derek looks on. Holding her son's face in her hands, tears of relief stream down her cheeks as she gazes upon him, safe and sound. Following the emotional reunion, and excitedly presents a gift to Takir, while Derek watches the scene with a gentle, knowing smile. The boy's face lights up with a brilliant, unrestrained smile of pure happiness. Later, in the lounge, the attendant Raymond gently adjusts Takir's hair and informs him that, from this day forward, he should be addressed as Baronet Solis. He sits with the boy on an ornate sofa, suggesting there's no need for such formality. Takir, however, sits up straight and respectfully accepts the instruction, addressing him as Baronet Solis. A map of the Care Kingdom's southern region clarifies the recent journey. After the battle at the Southern Gate Fort, the forces of the Solis barony traveled directly to the capital, Quirce, to be rewarded for their achievements before returning to their home territory of Est. Raymond continues his explanation, confirming that Takir now possesses a noble rank of his own. This was a direct result of his brother, Derek, being commended for his light magic, which threw the enemy into disarray and changed the course of the battle. For this, Derek was awarded 500 gold coins and the title of Baronet, which he has evidently passed on to Takir, meaning the boy won't have to wait for his father's title to be passed down. He internally seethed with jealousy, though his mind also turned to the practicalities of his new station. A yearly stipend from His Majesty. He began to wonder what he should use it on. Beside him, his brother Derek simply beamed. His thoughts, however, quickly shifted from finances to his brother's surprising development. Derek had already grown enough to surpass his own history, yet remained as full of surprises as ever. Takir contemplated the title of Baronet, a non-hereditary honor that lasted only one generation and came with no land, but still established its holder as the head of a noble family. His 12-year-old brother had become famous overnight, leading his allies to victory with his rare light magic. As if sensing his younger brother's deep contemplation, Derek adopted a smug expression, swirling a glass of juice. He leaned in, feigning ignorance. "HM, what did you say? I can't seem to hear you that well," he teased. He then leaned forward eagerly, his playful demeanor shifting to genuine curiosity. "So, how did our strategy go? Tell me more stories about the battlefield." Takir noted how this side of his brother reminded him of their father, and readily agreed. "All right, just leave it to me, Baronet Solis." As Takir began his tale, Derek's face lit up with a fierce grin. The strategy, he declared with absolute conviction, was absolutely perfect. He gestured animatedly, enthusiastically recounting the key moments himself. By using light magic, the enemy's iron cavalry was thrown into disarray. Then, at Takir's signal, their father gave the order. Takir's voice took over the telling, describing the battlefield as it had been. After the initial disruption, they fired upon pre-designated zones. From his position, Takir had given the precise command. "Our aim is Zone 2, to the right." In response to that command, his father, Baron Solis, raised his arm and roared the order across the field. "Fire!" A massive volley of arrows soared through the air, descending upon the enemy ranks with terrifying precision and sowing immediate confusion. The enemy soldiers cried out in disbelief. One shouted, "What is happening?" They were being struck from an impossible distance, the arrows piercing straight through their armor. He continued his battlefield account, explaining that as the enemy archers fell back from the volley, his own forces were ordered to watch them retreat and then move back into formation. The opposing commander, seeing only 600 men on the hill, misinterpreted this as a full retreat and ordered his men to charge and kill every archer they had. His soldiers were stunned as a second volley of arrows was fired upon them. From his vantage point, Derek observed with satisfaction that the three-row volley tactic was proving even more effective than initially expected. Seeing the enemy thrown into chaos, Baron Solis declared that it was time for their own charge. He rallied the cavalry, shouting for them to follow him into the fray. The charge was devastating. The enemy commander, Marquis Gott, could only watch in disbelief as his iron cavalry, 2,000 strong, was utterly annihilated. With the enemy broken, Baron Solis pressed the advantage, ordering his army's wings to close in and create a half-encirclement to push them back. Takir's narration of the battle's climax concluded, noting that it didn't last much longer after that point. Returning to the present moment, he explained to Derek how the tide of the entire battle had turned in an instant. The kingdom's army chased after Marquis Gott, attacking his rearguard several times as he fled in disarray all the way to the border. Derek thanked him for the story, calling it a great victory. Takir then provided a more detailed assessment, estimating that of Marquis Gott's 7,000 soldiers, half were lost, the iron cavalry was practically gone, and 40% of his total forces were killed or wounded. He then put the victory in perspective. In a previous engagement, the Solis army had lost around 40% of its own forces. This time, they escaped with most of their army unharmed while dealing a massive blow to the enemy. Derek declared it the best possible outcome, attributing it all to Takir's strategy. Takir smiled, reminding his brother that the plan wouldn't have worked without his light magic. After a moment of cheerful agreement, he eagerly accepted Derek's unspoken request, promising that the next story would be about the award ceremony. While relaxing on an ornate sofa, Baron Solis asks his son, Takir, about his trip to the capital for the award ceremony. Takir enthusiastically confirms his attendance. The Baron acknowledges that this is only natural, but clarifies that most of the public recognition for the victory actually went to Marquis Habsburg. Takir listens, absorbing the political reality of the situation. He considers this, holding a small confection. While the Marquis received the fame, Takir knows that the one who made the biggest contributions in actual combat was someone else entirely. That someone was the Solis barony's army. Derek, clad in armor, proudly makes the declaration, adding that their reward is a staggering 8,000 gold coins. Takir looks up at him, utterly astonished by the sum. In a memory from the ride home, Derek wishes Takir had seen how happy his father was, noting that wiping out Marquis Gott's famed Iron Cavalry was a truly significant achievement. Takir can only offer a strained laugh in response. Back in the present conversation, Takir learns more details. The second-ranked award went to his uncle, Baron Cornell, whose encampments were vital in defeating the Iron Cavalry. The third went to Viscount Kilias for charging through the opening the Solis forces created. Takir notes internally that he heard his father had personally vouched for his uncle's contribution, validating his own opinion on the matter. His father confirms that this recognition will silence those who had previously mocked them. Takir imagines his uncle and his soldiers overjoyed, with Baron Cornell profusely thanking his brother-in-law. He agrees enthusiastically. As he eats the confection, Takir processes the information. He realizes the reward was given in gold coins instead of territory, because it was a defensive battle, concluding that this outcome is far more beneficial for their domain. His father then adds a final detail. The Marquis has also ordered the Solis-Cornell alliance to handle the cleanup of the battlefield. Takir, taken aback, questions the meaning of cleanup. The grim reality dawns on him. He voices his sudden, horrified understanding that they couldn't just leave the bodies of the fallen soldiers and their horses scattered across the field. He continues his conversation with his father, asking for the exact figures of their gains. Baron Solis explains that while the recovered weapons and war horses are first sent to the Marquis for redistribution, their family was given priority since they are responsible for maintaining the highways. He also notes the grim necessity of burying the bodies to prevent plague and deter monsters. His father specifies the spoils, around 250 war horses and equipment for 1,000 soldiers. Takir's eyes widen in amazement, realizing this is even more than the number of soldiers they had deployed. He listens intently as the Baron adds that much of the armor is dented or completely crushed. The plan is to restore what is salvageable and sell the rest to blacksmiths as raw materials. Takir quietly takes in the information. A thought causes his expression to shift, which his father immediately notices, asking what's on his mind. Takir quickly brushes it off with a cheerful, unconvincing smile, claiming it's nothing. Despite his outward dismissal, his mind dwells on the grim reality of their new assets. The idea of reusing armor stripped from the bodies of dead soldiers is a deeply unsettling one. He shudders involuntarily. While he understands it's a natural and necessary measure to avoid wasting valuable supplies, the man from modern-day Japan within him finds it impossible to get used to. However, pushing aside his moral qualms, he considers the practical implications. For the Solis barony's financial situation, 8,000 gold coins and a massive amount of spoils of war. This is an absolutely huge opportunity. As he gets lost in thought, planning how to use this funding for his seventh arrow strategy, a voice suddenly shouts his name. His brother, Derek, has appeared right behind him, making him yelp in surprise. Derek grins, teasingly asking what he's plotting now, noting that it's written all over his face. Caught off guard, Takir lets out a nervous laugh, thinking to himself that he must be more careful. This influx of resources prompted a huge change in the Solis barony's army. Many militia members joined the standing army, which was reorganized to consist entirely of cavalry. The new forces included 200 riders for the Iron Cavalry, 100 riders for the main cavalry, with 200 spare war horses, a 350-person archery corps, and a 50-rider two-headed falcon mercenaries. This buildup vastly improved their mobility and battle capabilities. In a moment of quiet counsel, Takir kneels before his father, Baron Solis. They agree that for the sake of the future, the existence of the Estel Bow must remain a closely guarded secret. To this end, they have also enlisted the aid of Baron Cornell, the Baron's brother-in-law, who has pledged his cooperation. This strategic secrecy was part of a larger chain of events set in motion by the conflict on the Southern Gate Plains, a battlefield situated between the capital and the eastern territories of the barony. As a direct result of this war, the military might of the Solis barony grew exponentially, becoming far larger than what a nobleman of a mere baron's rank should rightfully be able to command. Lying in his bed, Takir reflects on this unprecedented growth. He realizes that while the recent turmoil was meant to be one of the great disasters he knew from his past life, it had instead, through a stroke of good luck, become an opportunity for them to grow even stronger. This, he muses, must be the irony of fate. He mentally catalogs the pillars of their success. The ever-normal granary, irrigation systems, and flood control measures created a resilient territory. The industrialization of flour production via water wheels increased their income, and skillful speculation during good and bad harvest had earned the barony a fortune. The war itself yielded unexpected boons. Instead of suffering great losses, they achieved a decisive victory, bolstering their military power and securing more funding. Their would-be greatest foe, Commander Weiss, had become an ally. Furthermore, accepting refugees greatly increased their productive population. A satisfied smile spreads across his face as he considers all these positive outcomes. He thinks to himself that this is a perfect example of turning misfortune into fortune. His expression then shifts to one of serious concentration. He notes that the flood control measures are progressing steadily, and the foundation is being laid to cope with war damage, all according to his plans to counter the 5 great calamities from his past life. A look of intense, almost manic satisfaction flashes in his eyes. He realizes that everything is going well. No, he corrects himself, it's going even better than that. Yet, as he recalls this moment of triumph, a deeper understanding tempers the memory. Back then, he still didn't fully comprehend what the irony of fate truly meant. He knew the old saying all too well: the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. With the fate of the barony now so prominent, a new future was unfolding. But this new path would inevitably bring with it unknown enemies and unforeseen disasters. On the windowsill, a thick tome titled History of the Solis Barony lay closed, a silent testament to the past as he contemplated the uncertain times ahead. Sometime after his father's triumphant return, Takir learned something interesting from the house steward. Apparently, Baron Solis had attempted to give the reward money to Captain Weiss, but the captain refused, stating he did not want to take credit for the achievements of Takir and his brother, Derek. The steward continued, explaining that Derek had informed him that after being told this, their father had no choice but to accept. Derek also mentioned that he had already received a reward from the royal family, and that a separate reward would be prepared for Takir. With the promise of a reward fresh in his mind, Takir now stands before his father's office. Announcing his arrival, he feels a surge of excitement, certain that he has been summoned to discuss this very matter. He enters the room to find his father, Baron Solis, seated at his desk, flanked by Raymond and Sarah. Derek is also present. As Takir wonders what he might receive, his father addresses him directly, acknowledging that he played no small part in their victory during the war. In response to his father's measured praise, Derek passionately interjects. He lists Takir's specific contributions, the use of light magic, the earth magic traps, and the creation of the Estelbau, and questions how it's possible for one boy to have conceived of them all. He then grows more contemplative, acknowledging the dilemma. Takir is still just a 9-year-old child, and there is no way they could reveal the full extent of his contributions to the public. Takir realizes his father is cornered. For the official records, he must acknowledge his son's role. The Baron declares that based on his achievements, Takir will be granted 1,500 gold coins, but upon meeting certain conditions. The boy is stunned by the amount, but immediately wary of the attached strings. His father clarifies one part of the condition. 500 of those gold coins can be used by Takir however he wishes. This clarification does little to ease the tension, as both Takir and Derek grow more suspicious about the nature of the full condition. Derek explains the rest. The remaining amount will be treated as a budget. If Takir has any proposals for its use in the future, they can draw from that budget after it's approved. Takir internally notes that this doesn't sound much different from his current situation. Despite his desire to complain, Takir decides to hold his tongue for now. He is still receiving something, after all. Bowing respectfully, he gratefully accepts the offer, but then immediately adds that there is something else he would like to confirm with his father. He internally panics, believing his father is merely playing along to recoup his own losses. His thoughts are interrupted when he sees Quirce trembling, her fear of the Baron palpable. He realizes with a jolt that her fear is justified. Flustered, he turns to his father, stammering for him to listen. He declares that Quirce is someone his father must never oppose, a sentiment Quirce herself eagerly confirms. He then pivots to the steward, asking Raymond for confirmation. Raymond calmly affirms that Takir has saved the Solis family many times. Hearing this, Baron Solis agrees, stating that the entire budget will be dedicated to Takir's new proposals. Takir internally celebrates this complete reversal of events, amazed that he managed to get the steward to say such a thing. His father, however, watches with a pained expression, feeling that the reward is far too small. He knows that unless history can be changed, even these peaceful family moments will vanish in 7 years. The serious atmosphere is broken when Quirce, with Sarah peeking from behind Takir, excitedly asks about her own reward. Her question prompts an affectionate onslaught, as Quirce, Sarah, Derek, and his mother all joyfully mob a flustered Takir. Stealing his resolve, Takir faces his father once more. He declares his intention to protect everyone and create a new future, formally accepting the 1,500 gold coins. The Baron simply responds, sure. Later, alone in his room, Takir reflects. He had been worried, but he successfully obtained the funds. He notes that preparations for the flood are going smoothly and that he must thank his mother and the others for their support. His thoughts darken as he considers the future. While he can see the end of the 5 calamities from his past life, 2 great disasters still loom. In 4 years, his older brother will die in war, and in 7, an epidemic will destroy his family and their territory. He realizes that to save his brother, he will likely have to join the battlefield himself. He questions the feasibility of this plan, wondering if a 13-year-old would be allowed to fight and acknowledging that his own sword skills are merely average. The path to changing fate seems daunting. He clenches his fist, steeling his resolve. At this rate, he won't be able to do anything in the 4 years before the war. He refuses to let that tragic future happen. He knows he must hurry. Only by setting his 3 arrows in motion, the archer training program, the regional development plan for the captain, and the reception desk, can he save his brother from his fated death. His thoughts then turn to the next crisis. Sitting on his bed, he considers the epidemic set to strike 7 years later. So little is known about it that formulating any countermeasures seems impossible. The weight of it all becomes painfully clear. His own power is not enough. If he continues doing things as he always has, he won't make it in time. With a frustrated sigh, he collapses back onto the bed. He laments the cruelty of the world before a stark realization hits him. To freely control even a single city, let alone change fate, he needs manpower, authority, and immense financial power. Before he can do anything, he needs money. This realization snaps him out of his despair. Now is not the time to be depressed. While raising capital is vital, he also needs to find talented people. And not just any talent. Decisively, he resolves to get the money from his father, uncaring if he's labeled a miser for it. His mind zeroes in on the specific type of person he requires. Someone capable of turning the odds of a completely unfavorable battle. A new, critical objective forms. He needs to find a mage. With his objective clear, he reflects that he managed to get his mother's permission for his previous plans with just a single word. Up until now, all his countermeasures have been defensive. Now, it is time to go on the attack. He turns to act on his decision, addressing his maid. And he begins, "I'm sorry, but we're going to be busy for a while." He feels this is the perfect time to begin. A year passes. Now 10 years old, Takir stands confidently before his maid. "It's time to prepare the 7th arrow," he declares, asking for her help. And, ever loyal, replies gladly. He and his father arrived at the refugee camp reception desk, a simple wooden structure set up amidst tents. As they approached, Baron Solis called out for a woman named Claire, who turned to answer. A young attendant at the desk, Sarah, recognized the boy immediately, surprised to see the Solis family's prodigy in person. Takir wasted no time, asking about the current land usage. Sarah reported that while it was once at 40% capacity, it was now only around 20% occupied, and since they adjusted the placement of residents, there was plenty of available land. He thanked her, pleased with the news, and declared that construction of the shooting range could likely begin immediately. His statement was met with confusion from Sarah, who cautiously questioned if that was truly a wise decision, despite her position. Her hesitation prompted Baron Solis to recall a recent meeting. This area was slated to be used for territorial promotion, featuring businesses personally managed by the barony, such as restaurants and lodging. Takir overheard this and was impressed, realizing his father had been saving this piece of land for a future business endeavor. His admiration was cut short when Quirce chimed in, noting that since one of the prizes for the shooting range was a free meal voucher for the restaurant, it was the perfect spot to attract people. However, she then wondered if that would make it stand out too much, which seemed to be a significant concern. He became flustered by her worry, asking if there was some inconvenience he was unaware of. Stammering, he looked around and asked what everyone was so concerned about. His confusion turned to wide-eyed shock as Sarah hesitantly relayed what she had heard from the refugees and others at the reception desk. A rumor was spreading that a brothel would be built on that very spot. Meanwhile, Baron Solis wore a content smile. He amused himself that he'd heard from refugees about job openings for that sort of thing, finally understanding what was meant by personally managed businesses. Takir, realizing the source of the misunderstanding, quickly explained to Sarah that it was the first he was hearing of it. He admitted it explained a reluctance to build a shooting range in a high-traffic area. He reassured her not to worry, as the plan was still to build a restaurant nearby. Sarah appeared relieved. Takir instructs Sarah to begin recruiting more actively, noting that the shooting range will also have a reception desk requiring additional manpower. He specifically suggests that recruiting more young women would be a good idea. With a bright, determined expression, Sarah eagerly accepts the responsibility, telling him to leave it to her. As he watches her, a sudden, panicked thought crosses Takir's mind. He comically foresees his father having to personally manage what others might misconstrue as a brothel and imagines his mother's furious reaction. He quickly decides to wash his hands of the matter, resolving not to help or interfere. Sarah's enthusiastic yes echoes as Takir gives her a final instruction. If she finds any talent worth recruiting, she is to secure them immediately, without concern for the budget. Internally, Takir reaffirms his own goal. The reception desk will serve as a place for refugees, slum dwellers, and orphans to find work and protection. He feels it's time for him to get back in the game. Later, Sarah speaks with Claire, reassuring her. She explains that even if the refugee situation calms down and they have to reduce the scale of their operations, she will not let go of people she trusts, like Claire. She adds that there is also a child at the orphanage whom she trusts. Seeing Sarah's confident smile, Takir feels a sense of assurance. He concludes that this should be enough to get the shooting range and reception desk running at full capacity. He knows he will continue to rely on her heavily in the future. With that matter settled, his thoughts turn to a more pressing need. He looks ahead with determination, realizing that he can now finally begin his search for a mage in earnest. The calendar turns to the year 498. Takir, now 5 years old, sits slumped over a desk piled with documents. His frustration is palpable as a single, desperate thought consumes him. He wants a mage. He understands the stakes perfectly. To stand a chance against the Empire, he needs a personal mage. Yet the reality of his situation crashes down on him. It feels impossible. In this world, mages are divided into two fundamental types: The first type is the bloodline mage, whose abilities are awakened by the kingdom's ruler, a privilege granted to feudal lords and their families. The second type consists of those with a natural, innate affinity for magic. Takir panics as he does the math. With roughly 250 feudal lord families, there are perhaps 2,000 bloodline mages in the entire kingdom. A low-ranking noble like him has no chance of recruiting one. His path becomes clear. To bolster his forces, he must seek out and gather mages from among the common people. He looks out at an imagined bustling street, acknowledging the truth with a sigh. It would be nice if it were that easy. He considered the challenge of finding mages. A public ceremony to test everyone in the territory seemed too suspicious and expensive, especially for a population of only 8,000. He grimaced at the thought. It wouldn't be a laughing matter if such an effort yielded only 1 or 2 mages, or perhaps none at all. Wondering if there was another way, his attention fell upon a large tome. The text was small and difficult to read, but he soon realized it was a register containing the names, ages, and dwellings of the territory's people. As he scanned the page, his finger stopped on a curious heading, Characteristics. A jolt of realization struck him. This section listed aptitudes. He saw entries for water mage, wind mage, swordsmanship, and blacksmithing. He understood with sudden clarity. If he compared this book with the family registers, he could find any mage he wanted. To his astonishment, there were far more potential candidates than he ever imagined. He let out a triumphant laugh. This was practically cheating. It completely turned the tables in his favor. He resolved to get the family registers immediately. A few days later, however, his elation had vanished. He stared blankly, realizing the information was completely unusable. His frustration boiled over as he questioned, and he asked if the household tax information was truly all the government kept on its citizens, devoid of any personal details, and apologized, confirming that she had checked with the steward and it was all they had. Takir cursed under his breath, lamenting that this world lacked the sophisticated information gathering of his past life in modern Japan. He forced himself to calm down and think. His finger traced a specific entry in the book. A girl named Era, 26 years old, with an aptitude for water magic, listed as living in Al Village. He reasoned that he couldn't just send people to find someone matching that name and age, as there might be others with the same characteristics. But a new thought occurred to him. If she was the head of her household and the one who paid taxes, he could look up her name and specific whereabouts. Just as hope sparked, it was extinguished. He finally noticed a crucial detail he'd missed. The citizen list was from the care calendar, year 513, when he himself was 20 years old. The information was hopelessly outdated. The woman could be living anywhere by now. The realization sent a wave of frustration through him, and he slammed his hands down on the table, startling and who stood nearby. But then, his anger subsided, replaced by a steely resolve. If comprehensive family registers didn't exist in this world, then he would simply have to be the one to create them. He would collect the information himself. He resolved that there was no way he would let the outdated list of the domain's residents go to waste. This determination led him to establish a reception desk. He reasoned that if participants of the new shooting range were required to register, it would serve as a crucial step toward solving the problem of the lacking family registers. The system was implemented earlier than planned due to the influx of refugees, which also helped identify gaps in their registration process. He anticipated that once the shooting range opened, many people would register, allowing for more data collection. He was confident that people from outside the city of Est would flock to it, and if it proved popular, he could build more ranges in other cities. With a confident smirk, he realized that all he had to do was compile the data to complete his list of mage candidates. He acknowledged the potential issue of other nobles poaching these valuable and rare common mages, a thought he would need to address moving forward. For now, he was content to leave the grunt work to others, musing that he couldn't wait for the range to open. And so a few months passed. The opening day for the shooting range finally arrived. His face bright with anticipation, he adjusted his cravat. It was time for an inspection. A large, buzzing crowd had already gathered in front of the newly constructed reception desk for the shooting range. Within the crowd, a man spoke to a young woman named Carleen, noting that the Lord was giving out free ale vouchers and silver coins as rewards. He urged her to try, since it was free. Carleen hesitated, certain she wouldn't be able to hit anything, but the man insisted, pointing out the rare chance that she might succeed. His encouragement soured as he added that even someone like her, who couldn't do any work, could be useful. Her shoulders slumped as she reluctantly agreed. At the entrance to a new wooden establishment, the maiden gestures expansively, a bright smile on her face. She calls out to the gathering townsfolk, welcoming them to the newly opened archery range. She explains the rules to the growing crowd. Participation is free, with each person allowed up to 30 shots a day. High scores will earn prizes. After confirming a person's registration, she hands over a quiver of arrows designated for the range. Inside, an archer takes a shot. Another man, having finished, triumphantly calls for his prize of 2 free drink vouchers. Beside him, Carleen looks on with exasperation, muttering that she had wanted him to win dried noodles, not just think about silver coins. The patrons buzz with excitement. One asks if there is a regular tournament, and his companion confirms it, adding that the top prize is gold. Another man overhears, shocked to learn that the grand annual tournament is rumored to offer a prize of several dozen gold coins. Word of the prizes spreads. A craftsman declares his serious intent to compete, vowing to practice every day, drink for free, and win the gold for himself. Observing the lively scene from a doorway, Takir smiles beside Anne. He remarks on how excited everyone is, and replies with a sigh, reminding him that he was the one who stirred them up by calling himself the best archer in Ast. She continues, noting that as evening falls, more people are arriving after work. She compliments Takir, observing that the prizes are being won frequently and that the patrons are quite skilled. As she speaks, Takir chuckles quietly to himself. He knows the truth. He is deliberately making it easy to win prizes in this initial period, and glances at him, a question in her eyes, puzzled by his secretive amusement. His plan unfolds as intended. The success of winning small prizes after work, a free drink, a compass, some coins, will become a positive experience that encourages people to return day after day, turning it into a habit. He has already planned to gradually increase the difficulty later on. With a confident smirk, Takir reflects on the cycle he has engineered, a trigger, a reward, and repetition, creating a loop of habit. He thinks to himself that they will never escape it, and watches him, remarking internally that his every thought is written plainly on his face. He observes the bustling archery range with satisfaction. His maid, and notes that the range seems to be running smoothly, and Takir agrees. She expresses her surprise that he made the range's operation part of the standing soldier's duties. Takir confirms, adding that managing the crossbows requires a certain number of people. Smiling, he explains his clever arrangement to Raymond. By making the range a training facility for soldiers during the night and morning, the barony covers their wages. He also thanks Raymond for arranging for the administration to cover the reception staff's costs. Their conversation is cut short by an angry shout from the crowd. Hey, what do you mean no prize? Takir turns, startled. The commotion comes from a burly man arguing with Geld at the prize counter. The man, who scored only 5 points, insists he should get something. Takir realizes with some annoyance that people are already trying to cheat the system on the first day. Seeing this, and steps forward, assuring Takir that she will handle the situation, and calmly approaches the irate patron and asks if there's a problem. The man glares down at her, his fists clenched in frustration, clearly agitated by the denial of a prize. As Anne intervenes, Raymond remarks to Takir that since entry is free, all sorts of people will come, making guards essential. Takir smiles knowingly, confirming that he's already aware of the man's name and is adding him to a blacklist. He thinks to himself that this is wonderful, mentally telling the man not to bother coming back. He reflects on his progress. At this rate, the number of registered participants will surely increase. His dual goals of finding magic users and strengthening the populace are proceeding exactly as planned. His thoughts are interrupted by another sudden exclamation from the crowd. Suddenly, he finds himself being lifted into the air. It's Anne, carrying him away from the crowd. He can't see what's happening and internally panics, hit with a wave of guilt as he remembers he's a middle-aged man in a child's body being carried by his maid. As Anne swiftly carries him away, onlookers shout in amazement at her speed and strength, exclaiming, "There she goes again!" And amazing. From his new position, Takir's attention is captured by a young woman at the firing line. He wonders if she is the cause of the crowd's excitement. He notes that she seems inexperienced in handling the bow. The woman, another maid, focuses intently on her target. A sharp thwack echoes as the arrow strikes true. Takir stares in utter shock. The maid remains poised, her expression unreadable but intensely focused. Her flawless archery sent a jolt through Takir. He was suddenly reminded of an old rumor, that a mage's elemental aptitude is often indicated by certain physical traits. His eyes widened in sudden comprehension. His gaze followed the unassuming maid as she walked away, her long, dark hair swaying. While it was only a possibility, he couldn't shake the burgeoning thought that she might be more than she appeared. This suspicion spurred him to immediate action. Back in the baronial manor's study, he finished preparing a document, sliding it decisively across his desk. An hour into his work, Takir was deeply focused, having undertaken the task of creating a list of individuals with magical aptitude by combing through the entire territory census. His process was entirely manual and painstaking. He first converted all ages to their current value, then meticulously cut the list of names into individual strips before beginning the arduous task of reorganizing them by address and age. The sheer effort left him drained. He slumped in his chair, a thought from his previous life echoing in his mind, a deep longing for a computer and the simple efficiency of a spreadsheet. However, as he reviewed his results, weariness was replaced by sheer astonishment. He stared at the final tally, exclaiming that it was simply impossible. The numbers defied all logic. Common knowledge dictated that magic users appeared at a rate of 1 in 500 people, meaning the Astol territory should have 2 at most. Yet his list contained 200 potential candidates. He realized that just because he hadn't found them didn't mean they didn't exist. With renewed resolve, he decided to narrow the search to residents age 10 and older and cross-reference them with the shooting gallery's registry. As he sifted through the mountain of paper slips, his hand paused, picking out a single one. He collapsed to the floor, staring at the name. He wondered aloud if such a coincidence was possible, but immediately dismissed the thought. There was no mistake. A profound realization washed over him. "So that's it," he murmured. "You were this close the whole time." A gentle smile touched his lips. 3 months after the shooting gallery began operating, he had finally found her, the first one. He holds a cup, taking a moment in the quiet room. He sits in the break room of the shooting gallery's reception area. Claire, who has joined him, apologizes for the humble meeting place. Takir dismisses her concern, saying he feels at ease and that it reminds him of the backyard of a part-time job he once had. In response, Claire presents him with a folder containing the previous day's registration information, noting that the numbers are higher than usual. He thanks her as she takes it. With a bright smile, she adds that for the first time, the number of single-day registrations has surpassed 100. She continues her enthusiastic report, pointing to a map of the territory. She confirms that the other 4 shooting galleries in the towns and villages are also doing well. With registration data constantly arriving from all locations, the cumulative number of members has already exceeded 1,000. The business is expanding with great success. Hearing the number 1,000 people, Takir is audibly impressed. He praises her work, saying it's amazing and all thanks to her and everyone else. As he thanks her again, Claire proudly states that the shooting galleries have become a full-blown boom in the Estole territory. His thoughts then turn inward, reflecting on Claire's significance. He recalls having a connection with her in his past life, but in this new world, they met sooner, and she has become an even more crucial ally. Before he knew it, she was managing all 5 shooting galleries and acting as his de facto aide, with over 50 people working under her. The thought sparks an idea, and he muses aloud that it's about time to hold a regular tournament. The thought makes him suddenly slump over the table, realizing he had forgotten something important due to his busy schedule. He apologizes, but Claire just smiles gently, understanding that it can't be helped. Having collected himself, he looks up with renewed purpose. He tells Claire that he wants to create an executive committee for the tournament and asks if she can gather talented people from each department to help. Before Claire can answer, the maid appears with a flourish, declaring that the job is as good as done. She announces that she has already finished selecting excellent personnel and will summon them immediately. Takir is relieved. He then adds that he would like to recommend a few people himself for the operations committee, to which Claire readily agrees. With the logistics being handled, his mind focuses on the true purpose of the event. He plans to find magic user candidates among the registrants and invite them to join the tournament's operations committee. This will create a pretext for aptitude testing, allow him to vet their loyalty and character beforehand, and prevent other territories from poaching them. It is a calculated move to secure valuable assets before anyone else realizes their potential. He lays out the next steps to his maid, and explaining that once the executive committee is established, they will hold a series of discussions. After that, he will seek approval to hold the event at the next regular meeting. And beams, clasping her hands together and enthusiastically accepting the responsibility. As he watches her, Takir reflects internally that Claire is also incredibly capable, and while he's grateful for it, his thought trails off with a hint of unspoken concern. His unspoken concern prompts him to ask her directly if she is getting enough rest. En's response is immediate and forceful, her fist clenched in determination. She exclaims that she can't possibly rest when she has the opportunity to be so useful. Her passionate declaration leaves her looking at him expectantly. Takir can only offer a quiet apology and his thanks. He then promises that once the tournament is over, everyone can take a long, well-deserved rest together. The narrative flashes back to the first day of operation for a new archery range. A 14-year-old girl, Carleen, has been brought there by her father. While her father is excited about winning a free drink ticket, Carleen is filled with self-doubt. She reflects that she is always being scolded and feels that there is no way she could possibly succeed. Her father, after failing his own shot, exclaims that it's her turn. He hands her a large crossbow. Carleen hesitantly takes the weapon, asking if all she has to do is pull the trigger. She takes aim, her heart pounding as she focuses on the target. She correctly identifies the center as the highest scoring point. For a fleeting moment, an image of a different girl with long, light-colored hair flashes in her mind. With a steady hand, she fires the crossbow, sending the bolt flying straight and true. The bolt strikes the dead center of the target. A young, blonde-haired girl watching from the sidelines looks on, her eyes wide with astonishment. Carleen's father erupts in a loud cheer, praising her excellent shot. Startled by his sudden shout, Carleen flinches, but she internally reflects on the feeling of that moment, realizing it was as if she floated for an instant. She wants to confirm that feeling, to experience it one more time. With renewed purpose, her hand closes around another bolt. From that day on, her father brought her to the archery range every day. The blonde girl, Quirce, watches her captivated. Carleen had found something she could become, something that would make her father happy whenever she scored high. As the crowd murmurs about her skill, Quirce watches with a pounding heart, thinking how well Carleen is doing. Carleen turns and offers a polite greeting to someone who has just arrived. Her greeting is for the young lord's son, Takir, who stands beside his maid. And the sudden appearance of nobility startles Carleen so much that she drops the items in her hands. Krishia, too, is shocked to see them. Startled by his sudden appearance, she tried to excuse herself, explaining that her father was at a nearby shop. But Takir reached out, gently but firmly taking her arm. Wait, he insisted. My business is with you. He explained that he had witnessed her incredible archery skill and asked directly why she wasn't entering the regular tournament. Carlene immediately protested, exclaiming that it was impossible for someone like her. But Takir pressed on, explaining that with a registration token, participation is free and winners receive prize money. She remained silent, still hesitant. Takir then countered her unspoken concern about her father, speculating that he would likely encourage her to compete, not forbid it. He placed the decision firmly in her hands, but added with a smile, "It's up to you, but I'll be looking forward to your participation." His words left her speechless, a quiet yes escaping her lips. His parting encouragement echoed in her mind long after she returned home. She sat silently on her bed, clutching the prize she had won. Her father, sitting at a table nearby, asked why she was so late, but she didn't answer, her thoughts consumed by the young lord's unexpected proposal and her own swirling feelings. Her hesitation finally shattered, replaced by a surge of resolve. Clutching the small prize tightly, her eyes widened with newfound determination as she declared aloud to herself, "I want to enter the regular archery tournament."